Chapter 785. The Eighth Floor. Yi Xian had always felt that the real danger was not the temple or the experts of the dual realm sky. It was the prison pagoda itself, the 8th floor and the 9th floor. The prison pagoda's intelligence had not fully recovered, so it was not particularly dangerous. The 8th floor, on the other hand, had already woken up. Moreover, it was restless, but its intentions were unclear. What did it want? Did it want the pagoda? If it wanted the pagoda, with its current strength, it should be able to come out and leave with this broken pagoda. After all, the reason they were suppressed was because each floor not only had seals, but there were also Dao laws. And now, the Dao laws of the 8th floor were obviously not there. A simple seal would not be able to suppress it. Yet, the 8th floor did not come out and stayed in the pagoda. It must have a plan. Hearing the 8th floor's reply, Yi Xian smiled. Actually, Senior can leave, right? The voice laughed. Indeed. Yi Xian nodded. Junior will not beat around the bush, Senior. Since Senior can leave, why not? Is it because of yourself, or is there something Senior wants? The voice said, both. Both. Yi Xian smiled. What does Senior want? The 8th floor said, this pagoda. This pagoda. The other party did not hide it at all. Yi Xian smiled. With Senior's strength, taking this pagoda should not be difficult, right? The 8th floor said, yes. Killing you and the purple-clothed woman beside you is as easy as flipping my hand. Straightforward. Yi Xian was confused. Then why doesn't Senior do anything? After a moment of silence, the 8th floor said, Sai, you have too many backers. Killing you and taking this pagoda is easy, but the revenge is too much for me. Yi Xian, the 8th floor said, I will tell you the truth. I am waiting for someone to kill you. He will kill you and take this pagoda, then I will kill him. This way, I will not be affected by karma. Unfortunately, this person from the 4th dimension is a bit stupid. I am very disappointed. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. Killing with a borrowed knife. The 8th floor was waiting for others to kill him, then he would come and kill others. Obviously, the 8th person was afraid of the woman in a plain dress. Yi Xian asked, I presume the reason Senior did this is because of that woman in a plain dress? The 8th replied, You can say so. However, it's not entirely because of her. You're not simple yourself, and I don't want to be tainted by your karma. Yi Xian frowned. Not simple? The 8th person replied, Yes. Yi Xian asked, What's not simple? The 8th replied, There's no point in telling you. Yi Xian didn't ask again. Anyway, he already got the answer. The guy in front of him would not kill him first. That was enough. If he was killed by someone else, the other party would avenge him. When he thought about it this way, he suddenly realized that it wasn't a bad thing. Yi Xian turned to leave. As if he had thought of something, he asked, Senior, has the 9th floor awakened as well? The 8th person replied, I don't know. I don't know. Yi Xian nodded slightly and left quickly. Yi Xian arrived at the 1st floor and looked up. At this moment, Venerable Sword was still sitting in front of the 2 swords. Ever since Venerable Sword had arrived, he had been sitting in front of the 2 swords, as if he was comprehending something. Yi Xian knew that these 2 swords might have enlightened Venerable Sword. If this continued, Venerable Sword's attainments in Sword Dao might improve greatly. If Venerable Sword improved, it would naturally be a good thing for Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and left the prison pagoda. In the following days, apart from cultivating every day, Yi Xian spent the rest of his time accompanying Yi Ling. This period of time was also the most peaceful for the siblings since they came to the Black-Yellow Great World. Now, everyone's target was Venerable Sword. No one cared about Yi Xian anymore. Even Temple had disappeared from the Black-Yellow Great World. Now, the Black-Yellow Great World could be said to have been unified. Any expert in the Black-Yellow Great World would respectfully address Yi Xian as King Yi when they saw him. It should be known that the entire Black-Yellow Great World would tremble when Yi Xian stomped his feet. On this day, Yi Xian arrived in the sky, which was once Temple. Of course, it was only one of Temple's strongholds in the Black-Yellow Great World. This piece of land was still empty. Yi Xian did not let anyone occupy this territory. The main reason was that there were too many people who coveted this territory. This was because there was origin purple qi here. This was very useful for cultivators. At this moment, the great elder of the Dao sect suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. He cupped his fists at Yi Xian. "King Yi," Yi Xian said softly, "I heard that your Dao sect has been eyeing this place for a long time." The great elder said in a low voice, "King Yi, this place is extremely important to my Dao sect. Please, King Yi." Yi Xian suddenly turned to look at the great elder. "It's extremely important to your Dao sect. Should I give it to you?" The great elder hesitated and then said, "King Yi, this place is really important to my Dao sect. If King Yi is willing to part with it, my Dao sect will definitely." Yi Xian interrupted the great elder again. "In the future? Why didn't your Dao sect come out when I fought with Temple? It's understandable that you didn't come out to help. After all, you don't owe me anything. However, after we won, your Dao sect wants to share the spoils of war. Isn't this a little shameless?" The great elder's face was a little ugly. He was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly attacked. The great elder's arms were directly cut off. Blood spurted out. The great elder was shocked. He hadn't expected Yi Xian to suddenly attack. Yi Xian looked behind the great elder. "Dao sect, listen up. I don't want to waste my breath with you. This Sky Dome land belongs to me, Yi Xian. Don't even think about it. Otherwise, I'll personally go to your Dao sect. At that time, don't blame me for turning against you." A middle-aged man walked out from behind the great elder. This person was the Dao sect's sect master. The Dao sect's sect master looked at Yi Xian. "King Yi," Yi Xian suddenly said, "Scram." Hearing this, the Dao sect's sect master's face instantly turned gloomy. "He didn't give me any face at all." The Dao sect's sect master glanced at Yi Xian. He didn't say anything else and turned to leave. The great elder hurriedly followed after him. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Pass down my order. Secretly monitor the Dao sect. If there's anything unusual, kill them first and report later." A voice quietly rang out in the dark. In the current black-yellow great world, there was an army jointly formed by all the major forces. It was the Northern Army. This army consisted of powerful beings from the northern region, powerful beings from the Xinyuan family, and powerful beings from the Xinhuang world. In any case, it was formed by the various major forces, and the purpose of it was to deal with any sudden incidents. However, this army usually only listened to one person. That person was Yi Xian. The strength of this army could be said to be the strongest in the black-yellow great world, because they were the top powerhouses from all the major forces. At this time, Qiao Tian, suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. When he saw Qiao Tian, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Then he said in surprise, "You have reached the Earth's celestial stage?" Qiao Tian, nodded. "Surprised?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Very." He originally wanted to wait for Xiaoling, to refine the Earth's celestial pill and give it to Qiao Tian. He didn't expect that Qiao Tian, would reach the Earth's celestial stage directly. Yi Xian asked, "Is it because of the fountain of life?" Qiao Tian, said, "Not exactly. However, the fountain of life occupies 80% of the Earth's celestial stage, and the remaining 20% is in this place. I absorbed a lot of origin qi in this place. With the help of the fountain of life, I reached the Earth's celestial stage directly. Of course, the most important reason is that the woman broke the restrictive spell of the black-yellow great world with a single sword strike. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for me to reach the Earth's celestial stage even with these two things." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Anyway, congratulations. But your speed of improvement is really terrifying." Qiao Tian said softly, "You don't know how long I've been stuck in this stage. It's been too long." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "You've been accumulating for a long time." Qiao Tian looked at Yi Xian. "What's your next plan?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "I haven't thought about it yet." Qiao Tian looked around and said, "Besides the Dao sect, there's basically no other unstable factors in the black-yellow great world now. The stage here is too small, and it's not suitable for you." Yi Xian fell silent. Qiao Tian looked at Yi Xian and said, "Don't think about living a peaceful life. Your life is destined to be turbulent. If I'm not wrong, Xiao Tao is back in your hands, right?" Yi Xian looked at Xiao Tian. "You?" At this moment he was really shocked because he hadn't expected that Xiao Tian would know that the prison pagoda was back in his hands. Xiao Tian said indifferently, "No one can find Sword Venerable, and the last place he disappeared was here. If I'm not wrong, Sword Venerable should be here, or he's dead." She paused for a moment and said, "Is he dead?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No." Xiao Tian nodded. "No matter what, this matter is quite complicated now. You must be careful. Don't let anyone know that Sword Venerable is here. Otherwise, everyone's attention will be focused on the northern region once more." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Of course I know that." Xiao Tian nodded. "Also, be careful of the Divine Hall. They aren't stupid. If I'm not wrong, Yuan Xiaodao might have guessed that Sword Venerable is in the northern region. You'd better have a plan to deal with it, otherwise, you might suffer a huge loss." Yuan Xiaodao. Yi Xian nodded. This woman wasn't simple at all. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up and saw a woman walking over slowly from not too far away. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the woman. It was none other than Yuan Xiaodao. "She's here again." Yi Xian's face instantly sank. Chapter 786. Needless to say, Yi Xian was quite annoyed at this moment. This Yuan Xiaodao is going against me. There's no end to it. Yuan Xiaodao walked in front of Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian with a smile. "What, are you not happy to see me?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "Should I be happy?" Yuan Xiaodao covered her mouth and laughed. "Yi Xian, no, I have to respectfully call you King Yi now. King Yi, this is your fault. No matter what, we are good friends." Yi Xian suddenly waved his hand. "Miss Yuan, if you have something to say, then say it. I really have no interest in getting entangled with you." Yuan Xiaodao didn't get angry and said with a smile, "King Yi, just tell me the truth." Yi Xian slightly frowned. "Tell me what?" Yuan Xiaodao stared at Yi Xian. "That Sword Venerable didn't leave the northern region, right?" Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. "It seems that Miss Yuan still doesn't believe me. If you don't believe me, you can go search the northern region yourself." Yuan Xiaodao stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Yuan, think about it. With Senior Sword Venerable strength, if he wants to leave, who can stop him? Moreover, what reason does he have to stay here?" Yuan Xiaodao said with a smile, "I have to ask you." Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. "Alright. Miss Yuan, Senior Sword Venerable is here. Really, not only is he here, but the World Prison Pagoda has also returned to my hands. Are you satisfied now?" Yuan Xiaodao stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian said with a smile, "And then? Miss Yuan, are you going to attack me like before?" Yuan Xiaodao looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, "Yi Xian, do you really think that you can play with all the experts in the palm of your hand?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Yuan, I won't talk nonsense with you. Goodbye." With that he turned around and left with Xiao Tian. He didn't want to waste his breath on this woman. Yuan Xiaodao stared at Yi Xian's back and fell into deep thought. Where was the Sword Venerable? Now, almost countless experts were thinking about this question. On the other hand, Yuan Xiaodao felt that the Sword Exalt was definitely in the north. Moreover, it was very likely that the World Prison Pagoda had returned to Yi Xian's hands. Of course, this was only her intuition. She had no proof. "Yi Xian." Yuan Xiaodao looked coldly into the distance. She was really annoyed with this swordsman. After a short moment, Yuan Xiaodao glanced at the sky, and then he turned around and left. In the sky, a divine sense was locked onto her. It was Al Yen. With Al Yen around, it would be extremely difficult for her to kill Yi Xian. In the sky, Al Yen looked at Yuan Xiaodao's back in silence. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian returned to the king's hall. After giving some instructions to everyone, he got up and left the north. Yi Xian knew very well that many people might still be suspicious of him. He had to leave. Otherwise, The attention of Yuan Xiaodao and the others would always be on the black-yellow great world. Attract attention. Of course, it wasn't just to attract attention. He also wanted to temper himself. He was now in the unknown realm and his physical body had reached the peak of the creation realm. Even if he encountered Yuan Xiaodao, he would be able to fight. However, he didn't have much confidence in defeating him. Moreover, he had to add all kinds of external items. After all, he was a god. Moreover, he hadn't seen Yuan Xiaodao's true strength since he came into contact with him. It was still a mystery how strong Yuan Xiaodao really was. As Yi Xian left the northern region, some strong people hiding in the dark in the northern region also left one after another. Obviously, there were many people who suspected that the Sword Venerable was still in the north. After Yi Xian left the north, he followed Lian, because Lian said she would bring him to one last place. In the starry sky, Yi Xian flew on his sword with Lian by his side. Yi Xian glanced behind him. He could already sense some obscure auras. Obviously, these people were here to follow him. Yi Xian looked at Lian. She said softly, "Let them follow us." Yi Xian nodded and looked at Lian. "Senior Lian, where are we going?" Lian smiled. "A place that no one has been to for a long time. When we get there, it will be time for us to part ways." "They're leaving." Yi Xian thought about it. "Thank you for all this time, Senior Lian." Lian smiled and looked at Yi Xian. "When the time comes, you'll have to face everything yourself. Are you ready?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'm ready." He knew that he couldn't always rely on others. Lian nodded and looked at the end of the starry sky. "You're growing fast, but that doesn't mean you're safe. On the contrary, the faster you grow, the more danger you'll be in. That's because you'll have to interact with more and stronger people." Yi Xian nodded. "I know." Lian looked at Yi Xian. "You don't know. You don't know your current situation. Think about it, the plain-dressed woman is so powerful, but she can't solve your crisis. Do you know why?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know." Lian said softly, "I don't know either." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian looked at the end of the starry sky. "Look at this starry sky. If we keep going forward, even if we die, we won't reach the end. There are too many unknowns in this vast universe. The plain-dressed woman is invincible, but who can guarantee that there's no one stronger than her in this universe? Just look at the person who created Xiao Ta in the fifth dimension. What kind of genius was he? Other than him, what kind of power did the strongest people in the fifth dimension have? Everything is unknown." Yi Xian shook his head. He didn't want to think about this, because there was no point in thinking about it. What's coming will come. Right now, he just wanted to walk the path he was on, step by step. Lian said, "You have to think of a way to control Xiao Ta." Yi Xian looked at Lian and smiled bitterly. So Senior knows? He didn't expect Lian to know that he had the World Prison Pagoda. Lian looked at Yi Xian. "I've been protecting you in the dark. I know better than anyone who's come in contact with you." Yi Xian smiled. "That's true. When the Sword Venerable came to the northern region, Lian must have been paying attention to him. She must know his whereabouts the best." Lian said, "You have to truly control this pagoda. Only then can you use it to deal with powerful enemies. Moreover, this pagoda has many other functions. You have to make use of them." Yi Xian nodded. The World Prison Pagoda had many functions. Just like Lian Qian said, if he could gather all the Tao laws, other than the plain-dressed woman and the others, no one else in the fourth dimension would be his match. Unfortunately, it was difficult to gather all the Tao laws. But it was fine. Yu had gone out to search for the Tao laws. Once he gathered them, Yi Xian would be invincible. At this moment, Lian suddenly said, "The place we're going to this time is a rather special place. Don't be glib-tongued when you get there, understand?" Glib-tongued? Yi Xian's face darkened. Was he glib-tongued in this senior's eyes? Lian said softly, "Do you know your biggest weakness now?" Yi Xian thought about it and said, "I don't know." Lian laughed. "Do you think that you have no flaws?" Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. "Maybe a little." Lian shook her head. "Slippery." Your biggest weakness now is that you don't have a thorough understanding of the fourth dimension. Yi Xian asked, what does Senior Lien mean? Lien said softly, a lot, but I don't have time to teach you too much. I don't know much either. They should be able to teach you a lot in this place. Yi Xian looked at Lien. Are they very powerful? Lien smiled. Very impressive. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then asked, Sir, who exactly are you? He was really curious about Lien's identity. Lien smiled. You'll know in the future. There's no point in telling you now. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. It's like this again. Everyone says there's no point in telling me now. At this moment, Lien suddenly turned around. Not far away, a woman walked out. This person was none other than Yuan Xiaodao. Lingering around, Yi Xian's face darkened. This woman is like a ghost. Lien smiled. Looks like Miss Yuan still doesn't want to give up on him. Miss Yuan glanced at Yi Xian, then at Lien. I'm curious where you guys are going. Lien smiled. Are you interested in coming with us? Yuan Xiaodao smirked. Of course. Then she looked at Yi Xian. You don't mind, right? Yi Xian was expressionless. Would you leave if I said I mind? Yuan Xiaodao smiled. No. Yi Xian shrugged. Isn't that enough? Yuan Xiaodao looked at Lien. Miss Lien, let's go. Lien nodded. Let's go. Then she turned and left. The three of them sped up. Before long, the three of them arrived at an unknown stellar field. Before arriving at this stellar field, they had passed through about a dozen stellar field black holes. Not only that, but they also encountered a few black hole storms. His heart palpitated at the thought of those black hole storms. It was too terrifying. Even an Earth immortal body couldn't withstand that kind of power. Fortunately, he had these two girls with him, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to reach this star field. And now, the people who followed behind them had almost all disappeared. He didn't know if there were still people following them. Suddenly, Lien pointed into the distance. Over there. Yi Xian looked into the distance and saw a black hall floating in the depths of the starfield. The hall was dark and eerie. Above the hall's door, there were two blood-red words, Netherworld. Yi Xian frowned. Netherworld Hall? P.S. Let me ask everyone, has anyone encountered this kind of thing before? Sometimes, something that has just happened feels like you've experienced it before. That kind of feeling of déjà vu is a little strange. Chapter 787. Nether Palace? Yi Xian looked at the black palace in the distance and asked, The Netherworld Palace? Lien nodded. Nether Palace. Yi Xian asked again, What faction? Lien smiled and didn't speak. Yuan Xiaodao whispered, I didn't expect such a powerful faction to exist in such a remote place. Lien looked at Yuan Xiaodao and smiled. Powerful? Why do you say so? Yuan Xiaodao looked at the black palace in the distance and said softly, Danger. Danger. At this moment, her expression was somewhat solemn. There were things that could make her feel danger in the four-dimensional universe, but they were few and far between. And now, she felt danger. Clearly, this wasn't an ordinary faction. Lien smiled. Let's go take a look. After saying that, she walked into the distance. Yi Xian hurried to follow him. Yuan Xiaodao hesitated for a moment, then followed. It didn't take long for the three of them to arrive before the Nether Palace. The palace was empty and cold. Yi Xian looked at Lien and Lien pushed the door open. Just as the door opened, a gust of cold wind blew in. The three of them walked into the main hall. The main hall was also empty. In front of the three of them, there were 11 statues of women. Looking at the 11 female statues, Elaine's eyes suddenly became a little dazed. Long time no see. Looking at the 11 female statues, Yi Xian was about to ask when Lien suddenly walked up to the third statue on the left. Looking at the statue in front of her, Lien's eyes suddenly became misty. Third sister? Third sister? Yi Xian looked at Lien and asked, Senior Lien, this is? Lien said, Bow to them. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then bowed to the statues. Lien nodded and looked at the statues. Finally, she looked at Yi Xian. Activate your bloodline. Yixian nodded, okay. As he spoke, he directly activated his bloodline. Soon, a red glow suddenly appeared around his body. The power of bloodline. Sensing Yixian's bloodline power, Yuan Xiaodao slightly frowned. This bloodline. Lian glanced at Yuan Xiaodao and didn't say anything. At this moment, Yixian's hair began to slowly turn blood red. Not only that, but his entire body also emitted an extremely powerful killing intent and vicious aura. Yuan Xiaodao's frown deepened when he saw this. Yixian suddenly said, Senior Lian, I can't suppress this bloodline power for much longer. The reason why he didn't dare to rashly activate this bloodline power was because he couldn't completely control it. Once this bloodline power was unleashed, even he would be afraid. Lian was about to speak when a statue nearby suddenly opened its eyes, and then a woman walked out of it. The woman was wearing linen clothes and a cotton skirt. She was barefooted. The woman looked directly at Yixian and frowned slightly. At this moment, she suddenly looked at Lian on her right. A trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. You? Lian smiled. Long time no see. The woman nodded. Long time no see. Saying that, she looked at Yuan Xiaodao who was not far away. The latter's expression changed and he became extremely cautious. Lian smiled. She's an enemy. Hearing that, the woman squinted her eyes. In the next moment, Yuan Xiaodao's expression changed drastically because the vitality in her body was disappearing at an alarming rate. Not only that, but a dense deathly aura was also emitting from her body. Yuan Xiaodao suddenly drew his blade and slashed. A ray of blade radiance tore through the sky. The blade was faintly discernible as if it didn't exist, but everyone could feel it. However, before the blade radiance could even get close to the woman, it suddenly disappeared without a trace. At this moment, the space around Yuan Xiaodao suddenly became illusory. Yuan Xiaodao's expression changed drastically. Without any hesitation, she flashed backward and appeared in the starry sky thousands of meters away. The woman raised her right hand slightly and was about to attack when Lian suddenly smiled. Forget it. The woman looked at Lian. Lian smiled. Let him deal with it himself. The woman looked at Yixian. Yixian said seriously, I don't think we can just let it go like this. It's better to kill him. Lian laughed heartily. Keep dreaming. Saying that, she looked at the woman. I came to you this time to ask you to mediate with him. He's still a little weak right now. The woman looked at Yixian. She sized up Yixian and nodded. Yixian was speechless. He didn't dare to retort because from the woman's attack, he was indeed a little weak. At this moment, Lian said solemnly, he's the person that crazy woman is looking for. Crazy woman. Hearing that, the woman frowned. Lian nodded. This matter is a little complicated. The woman looked at Yixian. Yixian hesitated for a moment and asked, who's that crazy woman? Lian smiled. The woman in the plain dress. Yixian's face froze. In the eyes of Lian and the others, the woman in the plain dress is a crazy woman? He hesitated for a moment and said, she's actually quite a good person. Hearing that, the woman's expression became slightly strange. Lian laughed. Quite a good person? That's right. She's quite nice to you. But she's not nice to others. Yixian was puzzled. But I think she's quite easy to get along with. Lian sighed. She's given all her gentleness and good temper to you. Of course you think she's easy to get along with. Yixian was speechless. Lian looked at the woman. The woman said, she's already found him. Why didn't she teach him herself? Lian shook her head and said, this guy isn't simple. His identity is too special. Not only does he have karma from the 4th dimension, he also has karma from the 5th dimension. From the looks of it, he might be related to the 5th dimension. That woman is currently fighting against the 5th dimension and blocking karma for him. The woman frowned. With her strength, she can enter the 5th dimension. Lian glanced at Yixian. It's all because of him. The 5th dimension won't let her enter. If she tries to force her way in, they'll kill her at all costs. That's why she doesn't dare to force her way in. But she's also restraining the fifth dimension to prevent its karma from reaching the fourth dimension. When she spoke up to here, she paused for a moment and said, "Only this fellow can make this woman compromise." However, with that woman's temper, once she enters the fifth dimension in the future, I'm afraid that those fellows from the fifth dimension will suffer a fate worse than death. The woman nodded. He's not to be trifled with. Alian smiled and said, "This guy is a little weak now, and he and that crazy woman are letting him grow freely, basically letting him grow. As for this guy, he's currently walking a little crooked, playing with all sorts of fancy things every day. This time, I've come to find you in hopes that you can help him understand the various laws of this world, so that he can better understand this world and prevent him from walking a crooked path." The woman looked at Yi Xian. "You're luckier." Yi Xian was confused. Just as he was about to ask, the woman suddenly said, "Can you beat that woman?" Yi Xian was startled. But he quickly understood who the woman was talking about. It was Yuan Xiaodao. Yi Xian thought for a while and said, "If I use some external objects, I might be able to fight." The woman asked, "What external objects?" Yi Xian took out his immortal slaying sword gourd and executing heaven sword. "This." The woman's gaze fell on the executing heaven sword. "You met her?" Yi Xian was puzzled. "A woman with a wine gourd hanging on her waist." The woman said, "The sword martial sex ancestral master." Yi Xian nodded. "She said she's coming to find me, but she's not here yet." The woman looked at Alian. Alian said softly, "She might not be in this universe right now. Otherwise, she would definitely come. But since her doppelganger saw her, her main body should be here as well." The woman nodded. She looked at Yi Xian. "What do you want to learn?" Yi Xian said hurriedly, "I want to learn both." The woman in the cloth dress said softly, "This universe is made up of countless substances and various types of energy. The laws are like a thread that affects these substances and various types of energy, and it can even change these substances and energy. But there are different substances and energies in this world. Therefore, the laws are also different. Some laws can only change relative substances and energies. Do you understand me?" Yi Xian blinked. "I don't understand." The woman suddenly opened her palm. In an instant, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He found that something was flowing out of his body quickly. Yi Xian quickly retreated. "This," the woman said, "the energy of life and the energy of death. To put it simply, it's yin and yang. Yin represents death, and yang represents life. Earlier, I utilized the energy of the laws to change your yin and yang. If this continues, then your yin and yang will be reversed and then you'll die. Understand?" Yi Xian quickly nodded. "I understand." At that moment he really felt that he was going to die. He had never been so close to death before. At this moment he finally understood why Yuan Xiaodao was so afraid. The woman looked at Yi Xian. "This is the power of the law. It can change some substances and energies in this world. There are also some laws that can strengthen some substances and energies. As a swordsman, if you can understand these laws and these substances and energies, you will be able to break all laws with one sword." As she said that, she opened her palm. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian became illusory. Not only that, but he suddenly felt that there was a strange airflow around him. But at this moment, the death chi turned into life chi. Chapter 788. The Chi of Life and the Chi of Death. It was the first time Yi Xian felt this power so clearly. Matter? Energy? He didn't really understand these two terms. But after the woman's explanation, he wasn't so naive anymore. Only by understanding the structure and essence of this universe and combining it with his own sword Dao would he be able to achieve what the woman in the cloth dress had said. He would be able to break all techniques with a single sword. Not only did he have to understand his own sword Dao, but he also had to understand all things in the universe. Meanwhile, the woman in a cloth dress said, "The path of cultivation isn't just about cultivating yourself, it's about understanding the world as well." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "What should I do?" The woman asked, "What do you think you should do?" Yi Xian kept quiet. Yi Xian found a problem at this moment. That was, his strength was different from the strength of these people in front of him. No, he couldn't be said to be strong. These people weren't just cultivating themselves, they were also comprehending the universe. They had a thorough understanding of the nature of the universe. Individuals, the universe. At the thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly understood. Yi Xian looked at the woman in the cotton dress. I kind of got it. The woman in the cloth dress nodded slightly. Observe the universe with yourself, understand the universe, control the universe, and finally destroy the universe. Destroy the universe? Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, Aliyan suddenly said, she didn't mean destroying the universe. Of course, there was a crazy woman who did it in the past. Then she looked at Yi Xian. After a pause, she added, do you know what level Yuan Xiaodao is at? Yi Xian said, above the earth immortal level. Aliyan smiled. What's above the earth immortal level? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Aliyan said softly, above the earth immortal is the fate state. Simply put, it's the knowing destiny state. Such experts have a certain understanding of the universe itself. They can sense the destiny of heaven and man. Such people are the real starters. Right now, you don't know the heavens and fate. Although you have the support of external items, you still have no chance of winning against a life realm expert. Yi Xian asked, Senior Aliyan, what is above the fate state? Aliyan smiled, breaking fate with one's heart, seeking Tao. Yi Xian asked again, what about above that? Aliyan shook her head. What does it have to do with you? Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. I'm just a little curious. Aliyan said, you might be in the unknown realm, but you need to understand where you are in this universe. You won't feel any pressure facing ordinary people. Even if it's Yuan Xiaodao, you still have a chance of winning. However, you have to understand that they are not the top powerhouses of this universe. You are still very, very weak compared to the top powerhouses of this universe. In addition to this universe, there is also a fifth-dimensional universe. The experts in that universe are definitely stronger than the ones here. Do you understand? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I understand. He still felt bitter in his heart. Fifth dimension, fourth dimension, both against him, Yi Xian. What kind of sin did he commit in his previous life? Aliyan smiled. Your current realm is unknown. Your physique is at great perfection and your sword Dao is at bright state. Your overall strength isn't weak, but you can't slack off. The path of Dao Yi is like rowing a boat against the current. If you don't move forward, you will fall behind. Moreover, this path is endless. Don't be complacent just because you have a little achievement, understand? Yi Xian nodded, I understand. Complacent? He wouldn't be complacent because there were still many people who could kill him, Yi Xian. Under such circumstances, what right did Yi Xian have to be complacent? Aliyan looked at Yi Xian. You stay here and learn from her. Ask her if there's anything you don't understand. You must learn well. Otherwise, if you meet a law master in the future, you won't even be able to fight back. But Yi Xian replied seriously. He was very clear that this was an opportunity for him. After all, not everyone was willing to teach an expert of this level. Naturally, he would cherish this opportunity. Aliyan turned and left. Senior Aliyan, are you leaving now? Yi Xian quickly asked. Not for now. I'll leave after you're done. Aliyan smiled. All right. Yi Xian nodded. Aliyan looked at the girl in cotton skirt. Teach her well. Be ruthless. The girl in cotton skirt nodded. All right. Yi Xian was speechless. Aliyan smiled and turned to leave. Outside, after Aliyan came out, she saw Yuan Xiaodao. At this moment, Yuan Xiaodao was staring at her. Aliyan smiled. Are you angry, Miss Yuan? Who is she? Yuan Xiaodao said in a deep voice. Aliyan asked softly, Miss Yuan, how much do you know about this universe? Or rather, how much does the Pantheon know about this universe? Yuan Xiaodao stared at Aliyan silently. Aliyan smiled. This universe is huge and there are many experts, isn't that so? Yuan Xiaodao was expressionless. Are you trying to scare me? Alian laughed. Why would I scare you? Miss Yuan, I just want to ask you, is there any meaning in targeting Yixian? You've always been afraid of him growing up and becoming a threat to you. Why don't you think about it the other way around? What if you become friends with him? If you become friends with him, the faster he grows, the more monstrous he becomes. It's not a bad thing for you, right? Yuan Xiaodao was silent. Alian continued, as for the treasure of the fifth dimension, Miss Yuan, do you still not understand? It's not something an ordinary person can possess. You should know that taking something that doesn't belong to you will kill you. Yuan Xiaodao was silent for a moment before saying, that's our chance. Alian smiled. Do you really think you can go to the fifth dimension with that pagoda? Yuan Xiaodao looked at Alian. Why? Alian smiled. Let me tell you the truth. Even if you get the pagoda, you won't be able to enter the fifth dimension. You need to understand the relationship between the fourth and fifth dimensions. This is the relationship between the weak and the strong. Even if you use the pagoda to enter the fifth dimension, you'll just be throwing your life away. Saying that, she shook her head. If you can't even understand the fourth dimension, why go to the fifth dimension? To get beaten up? To get beaten up? Yuan Xiaodao was silent. Alian looked at Yuan Xiaodao. You're a smart person, so you should understand what I'm saying. Of course, if you still want the pagoda and want to target him, then go ahead. In any case, no matter what happens to him, those who target him will die. Yuan Xiaodao looked at Alian. That plain-dressed woman? Alian smiled. It's not just the plain-dressed woman. Hearing that, Yuan Xiaodao narrowed his eyes. Not just her. Alian laughed. I won't talk to you anymore. You decide what to do. Saying that, she turned and left. On the spot, Yuan Xiaodao was silent. Actually, during this period of time, especially after coming into contact with Yixian, she was also somewhat shaken. Her heart to kill Yixian was shaken. If she could kill him, she wouldn't hesitate to do so. But the problem was Yixian easy to kill? During this period of time, she had personally witnessed Yixian's growth. This growth speed could no longer be described with words. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the people behind Yixian were not simple. She could already sense that there was a huge group behind Yixian. Regarding this group, not only did she know nothing, but even the temple also knew nothing. What kind of group was this? Could the temple really fight against them? Could they? Yuan Xiaodao was somewhat at a loss. Moreover, just like what the purple-robed woman had said, even if they obtained the fifth-dimensional treasure, would the shrine be able to keep it? Or could the temple use the treasure to enter the fifth dimension to fight against the fifth dimension? She was very clear that in this world, the strong were respected. If the temple was too weak, even if they entered the fifth dimension, their lives would be worse than dogs. Because they did not have the strength. Why must they go to the fifth dimension? Or rather, why could they not use their own strength to go to the fifth dimension and instead use this shortcut method? Yuan Xiaodao suddenly felt somewhat at a loss. At this moment, the saber at her waist suddenly trembled. Roughly 15 minutes later, Yuan Xiaodao's eyes were no longer at a loss, only determination. Yuan Xiaodao coldly looked at the distant starry sky. Why should I, Yuan Xiaodao, take a shortcut? After saying that, she suddenly drew her saber and slashed. The distant starry sky was suddenly torn apart. Not only was it torn, but it also became illusory. A powerful aura suddenly swept out from Yuan Xiaodao's body. At this moment, the endless starry sky was filled with Yuan Xiaodao's saber intent. This saber intent seemed to want to cut the endless starry sky. It was extremely shocking. Saber Dao had broken through. In the distance, in front of the Nether Palace, Alian glanced in Yuan Xiaodao's direction and softly said, "A genius." She did not expect that her words would allow Yuan Xiaodao to break through to the Saber Dao realm. Although the Bright Realm was only one level away from the Breakthrough Realm, there was a world of difference between them. Towards the end, the gap between each level was very, very large. Now that Yuan Xiaodao's saber intent had broken through to the Breakthrough Realm, if she fought with Yixian, even if Yixian used external items, he would not have any chance of winning. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Alian's mind. "Kill her, After a moment of silence, Lien said, "Wait for now." At this moment, Yuan Xiaodao suddenly appeared in front of her. Lien lightly smiled, "Congratulations." Yuan Xiaodao glanced at the Nether Palace and indifferently said, "I will not be his enemy anymore, nor will I cause trouble for him. However, I cannot guarantee that the temple will give up." Lien smiled, "It's fine. If the temple sends other experts, he will naturally deal with them." Yuan Xiaodao lightly nodded, "No matter what, thank you for what you said." After saying that, she glanced at the Nether Palace and was about to leave. At this moment, a powerful sword intent suddenly spread out from the Nether Palace. Sword intent. 2 sword intents. Lien looked at the Nether Palace with a flicker of surprise in her eyes. P.S. One more thing. Sometimes, when you look in the mirror, you feel that you look okay, but when you take a picture, you look extremely ugly. Chapter 789. Sword Intent. 2 completely different types of sword intent. Lien looked towards the Nether Hall. At this moment, Yi Xian was still comprehending. Yuan Xiaodao was silent. She knew that Yi Xian was about to advance again. He was a cheater. Life was all about cheating. Yuan Xiaodao shook his head. After giving up on targeting Yi Xian, she suddenly felt relaxed. Because no matter how monstrous Yi Xian was, it had nothing to do with her anymore. Let it go. At this moment, she finally understood that many times, letting go of something could lead to a different life. There were many times when one shouldn't be too stubborn in life. After a moment of silence, Yuan Xiaodao turned around and was about to leave. However, he seemed to have thought of something and stopped. He wanted to see the changes in Yi Xian. In the Nether Hall, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground with 2 types of sword intent revolving around him. Sword intent. Good and evil sword intent. What was good and evil? He had many comprehensions in the past, but the path of good and evil was really complicated. To put it simply, good and evil were the right and wrong of this world. Who could say for sure whether it was right or wrong? Everyone had a ruler in their heart that could measure right and wrong. However, right and wrong in this world weren't absolute. As for Yi Xian's good and evil sword intent, he couldn't see through the good and evil of this world. The only thing he could do was to remain true to himself and not do anything that went against his heart. He would not do anything that was against his conscience. As for the rest, he couldn't care less. Because he, Yi Xian, wasn't a saint. At this moment, the woman walked out of the hall. When he saw the woman, Yuan Xiaodao's expression immediately became vigilant. He was extremely fearful of this woman, even though it wasn't her main body but a clone. The woman glanced at Yuan Xiaodao before turning to Lien. "Why are you here?" Lien smiled. "To do something?" The woman asked. "Because of him?" Lien shook her head. "Not exactly. There are some things that I have to deal with." The woman nodded. "Where is that woman now?" Lien smiled. "The woman in plain dress?" The woman nodded. Lien whispered, "I do not know the exact location." The woman in the cotton dress fell silent. Actually, with her strength, she should have been able to go to the 5th dimension, but for that guy inside, she actually stayed here. This is not a good thing. The woman in the cotton dress nodded. This world could no longer contain that woman. In particular, this woman had a particularly bad temper. Her presence here was too dangerous for the universe. Because if she went crazy, no one would be able to control her. The woman glanced at the boundless starry sky in the distance and said softly, "It's still that universe, but it's not the universe I'm familiar with." Lien smiled. "You're lucky that you met an acquaintance like me. Otherwise, it would be even more boring for you to come out." The woman nodded slightly. "I do miss that little fellow and that little girl." Lien laughed. "I miss them too. Ever since they went to Lian Shuang's hometown, they've become more mischievous." A trace of a smile appeared on the woman's face when she heard this. Those 2 little fellows were indeed fun to play with. At this moment, the 3 women looked towards the Netherworld Palace at the same time. A man walked out from there. It was Yi Xian. Around Yi Xian, there were 1 black and 1 white sword essences circling him. Good and evil sword essences. The woman in the cotton dress sized up Yi Xian and said softly, "How is it?" Yi Xian smiled. "It feels great." The woman nodded slightly. "Congratulations, your sword heart has become clearer." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Comprehension. This time, his greatest gain was not his understanding of the laws, but his understanding of his sword Dao. The essence of sword Dao. While comprehending the laws and the essence of this world, he suddenly thought of the essence of sword Dao. What was the essence of sword Dao? It was actually the sword. The pure sword. The reason why there were countless sword Daos in this world was because of humans. Every human could give life to a sword and give them different sword Daos. There were thousands of sword Daos because there were thousands of humans. The essence of the sword was actually the sword. It did not have many fancy things, it only had them because of humans. They were whatever humans gave them. The essence of sword Dao was the sword. He should not be thinking about the sword, he should be thinking about himself. Because he was the ultimate essence of sword Dao. The human was the core. After thinking this through, he realized that his state of mind and sword essence had undergone great changes, especially his sword essence. His sword essence now felt like it had a life of its own. Taking a look at Yi Xian, Elaine nodded slightly. "I don't think you will be in any danger if you are no match for someone as strong as Miss Yuan." Yi Xian looked at Yuan Xiaodao and smiled. "Miss Yuan, how about a spar?" Miss Yuan raised her eyebrows. "That's what I was thinking." Then she looked at the two women. "You don't mind, right?" Lian smiled. "Of course. But please go easy on me." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior Lian, I'm not that weak." Lian looked at Yuan Xiaodao and said, "Then go hard. Just don't kill him." Yi Xian was speechless. Yuan Xiaodao looked at Yi Xian and said, "Make your move." Yi Xian didn't waste any time and stabbed out with his sword. He did not use any Xian Qi or sword techniques. It was just a simple sword technique. Lian shook her head and smiled when she saw Yi Xian attack. She knew why Yi Xian dared to challenge Yuan Xiaodao. The spar he was talking about didn't use any Xian Qi. It was just a simple spar of basic skills. How could Yuan Xiaodao not know what Yi Xian meant? She didn't use any Xian Qi either. She just used her fingers to clamp down on Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly let go of his sword and charged forward. But before he could hit Yuan Xiaodao, he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen and was pushed back dozens of meters. Yi Xian was stunned when he stopped. Yuan Xiaodao held the sword in his hand and said indifferently, "You want to compete with me in basic skills? What do you have to compete with me? I've been cultivating for thousands of years." "How long have you been cultivating? If it wasn't for your treasures, you would be the younger brother of the younger brothers. Understand?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Don't be arrogant. Let's continue." Yuan Xiaodao hooked her finger, "Come." With a leap, Yi Xian appeared right in front of Yuan Xiaodao. At this moment, Yuan Xiaodao suddenly disappeared. His speed was extremely fast. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He turned around and threw a punch. Boom. As soon as he punched, he was pushed back dozens of meters. But before he could stop, Yuan Xiaodao appeared in front of him again. In the next moment, Yi Xian felt his vision blur, and he instinctively raised his arms to block. Bang! Along with a muffled sound, Yi Xian was pushed back dozens of meters. Yuan Xiaodao didn't continue to attack. She just looked at Yi Xian. Again? In the distance, Yi Xian pondered for a moment before he said, "Come." Yuan Xiaodao pointed with her fingers, and the sword in her hand flew to Yi Xian. Yi Xian picked up the sword and slowly closed his eyes. He didn't make a move. Yuan Xiaodao smiled, "You're using silence to stop me? Let's give it a try." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly disappeared. She didn't use any Xian Qi or any divine ability, but her speed was still unbelievably fast. At this moment, Yi Xian attacked. This sword looked ordinary, and it was even a little slow. However, it accurately stabbed Yuan Xiaodao's fingertip. Bang! Yuan Xiaodao was forced to a stop by Yi Xian's sword. Not only that, but the power on her fingertip was also dissipated by Yi Xian's sword. Yuan Xiaodao's eyes flashed with surprise. "You have some skill. Continue." As soon as she finished speaking, her fingers suddenly trembled. Bang! The sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled violently, and a powerful force passed through the sword to his body. Bang! Yi Xian was forced to retreat. Yuan Xiaodao was about to chase after him, but at this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out. Yuan Xiaodao blocked it with her fingers. Bang! The sword was directly blocked, but at this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of her like a ghost. Then, a fist smashed towards her face. Yuan Xiaodao didn't dodge, and she also punched out. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated. In terms of strength, he was far inferior to Yuan Xiaodao. In the distance, Yi Xian stopped Xiali and shook his head. I can't beat her. Even if he didn't use profound qi, he still wouldn't be able to beat Yuan Xiaodao. Yuan Xiaodao's attainments in the martial Dao were much higher than his. Be it speed, strength, or battle awareness, there was a huge gap between him and Yuan Xiaodao. An expert like Yuan Xiaodao wasn't the kind that relied on strength. Yuan Xiaodao glanced at Yi Xian. You're not too bad yourself. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Miss Yuan is powerful, and I accept my loss wholeheartedly. A trace of surprise flashed in Yuan Xiaodao's eyes. This time, she didn't expect that Yi Xian would admit defeat so readily. At this moment, Alian suddenly said, Your foundation is very solid, but there's still a big gap between you and Miss Yuan. After all, she was able to come this far, so she definitely isn't weak. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to come this far. In the future, if you encounter other experts from the deity's Templar, don't be careless, understand? Yi Xian nodded, I understand. At this moment, Yuan Xiaodao suddenly said, Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Yuan Xiaodao, who smiled, I wish you a happy time with the next deity. Goodbye. With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian was stunned. Miss Yuan, you're not going to kill me? Yuan Xiaodao's voice came from afar. I'm not going to kill you. I already know who the next one is. Yi Xian, good luck to you. It was a gloating laughter. Yi Xian looked at Alian, puzzled. Senior Alian, what is she doing? After a moment of silence, Alian said, We're leaving too. Yi Xian asked solemnly. Alian nodded. You'll have to walk the rest of the way by yourself. With that, she was about to leave, but at this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. What a coincidence. Chapter 790. Alian and the woman were stunned when they heard that voice, and they turned around to look towards the distance. A woman was walking towards them. Yi Xian looked towards that direction as well. Meanwhile, Alian spoke abruptly, You can leave now. Yi Xian gazed at Alian. Senior? Alian smiled. Let's go. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and nodded. Farewell, Senior. As soon as he finished speaking, he bowed slightly to them, and then he vanished into the distance. At this moment, a woman walked in front of Alian and the woman in the cotton dress. The woman smiled. It's him. Alian nodded, and then she glanced at the woman. What are you doing here? The corners of the woman's mouth curled up. I've come to get you. To get me? Alian lowered her head slightly. The woman chuckled. Let's go. Alian nodded. All right. As soon as she finished speaking, she gazed at the woman. I have to bid my farewells. The woman nodded slightly. We'll meet again in the future. Alian smiled. Of course. As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished into the distance with the woman. The woman glanced at the starry sky around her, and then she waved her right hand. A strand of mysterious energy enveloped this expanse of the starry sky. A short while passed before her figure gradually became ethereal, and it didn't take long for her to vanish completely. At the end of the distant starry sky, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. At this moment, something occurred to him. How to get back? He remembered that the three of them had passed through over 10 enormous black holes on their way here, and Alian and Yuan Xiaodao were there to deal with them. But now, both of them were gone. So how was he supposed to get back? Yi Xian's face turned slightly unsightly. He hesitated for a moment and decided to go back. However, he noticed that the expanse of space had vanished when he turned around, and it was replaced by a boundless black hole. It's gone? Yi Xian was quite stunned. What's going on? He tried to enter, but he couldn't because the powerful force made him stop in his tracks. Yi Xian fell silent. He knew that Lien or the woman had definitely sealed off that area. They've really left. In the same place, Yi Xian was silent for a long time before he turned around and left. Now, he could only rely on himself to walk back. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived in front of a black hole. Looking at this black hole, Yi Xian's expression was rather solemn. Before he came here, he had personally experienced the terror of the black hole, especially the black hole storm inside the black hole. Even the body of an earthly immortal could be crushed into pieces. Yi Xian did not dare to be careless. A moment later, Yi Xian entered the black hole. He had to pass through it. As soon as he entered the black hole, a powerful force enveloped his entire body, and that force started to crazily tear at his body. Yi Xian hurriedly circulated his profound energy, and at the same time, his sword intent suddenly swept out from his body. As the sword intent protected his body, his entire body instantly felt relaxed, but he still didn't dare to be careless, because he hadn't entered the center of the black hole. About an hour later, Yi Xian finally arrived at the center of the black hole. When he arrived at this area, the strangling force around him became even more terrifying. Yi Xian gently waved his right hand, and the executing heaven sword suddenly flew out. The next moment, the executing heaven sword began to circle around him, and rays of sword radiance directly wrapped around him. The sword radiance protected his body. Only the executing heaven sword could withstand that force. With the protection of the executing heaven sword, Yi Xian suddenly felt much more relaxed, but he still didn't dare to be careless. After walking for about an hour, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. Because not far in front of him, there was a black tornado wreaking havoc. A black hole storm. Seeing this black hole storm, Yi Xian did not hesitate to turn around and run. It was definitely not something he could fight against. Unless he used the immortal slaying sword gourd or the sword of celestials. But he was a little flustered to fight in this black hole, because one mistake could lead to his death. Right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A black shadow suddenly flashed in front of him. Yi Xian's expression changed dramatically. Without any hesitation, he directly wielded the executing heaven sword and slashed down. A ray of sword radiance slashed down. Boom! A powerful force suddenly exploded in front of Yi Xian. In an instant, Yi Xian retreated rapidly, and the direction he was retreating in was the direction of the black hole storm. In front of him, the man in black was emitting a ball of flames, and a powerful force swept toward him like a volcanic eruption. Yi Xian did not dare to be careless. He directly took out the immortal slaying sword gourd. The next moment, the executing heaven sword entered the gourd. In the blink of an eye, a ray of sword radiance suddenly flew out from the gourd. Buzz! The sound of a sword suddenly resounded throughout the entire black hole. In front of Yi Xian, an explosion suddenly rang out. Then, the man in black instantly retreated thousands of feet, and wherever the executing heaven sword passed, everything turned into nothingness. Tens of thousands of feet away, the man in black had just stopped, and the flames around him disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian gazed at the man in black. With a wave of his right hand, the executing heaven sword flew back into the immortal slaying sword gourd. The man in black's eyes instantly narrowed when he saw this. Obviously, he was extremely fearful of Yi Xian's immortal slaying sword gourd and the executing heaven sword. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly as he gazed at the man in black. A moment later, the immortal slaying sword gourd trembled violently, and then the executing heaven sword suddenly flew out. A ray of sword radiance tore through the air. The man in black suddenly pressed his palms together and took a step forward. 10,000 flames converge. As soon as he spoke, a wave of flames suddenly swept out from within him, and then a human face suddenly condensed within the flames. A moment later, he suddenly opened his mouth and swallowed Yi Xian's executing heaven sword. A moment of silence ensued. Bang! A ray of sword radiance suddenly slashed out from within the flames. The executing heaven sword was pointed straight at the mysterious man in black. However, the remaining waves of flames had still arrived in front of Yixian. Yixian suddenly took a step forward, clenched his right hand tightly, and then smashed his fist forward. The fist of burial. This punch forcefully stopped the waves of flames in front of him. Meanwhile, the mysterious man in black retreated explosively for over 10 kilometers again. Moreover, his figure had become slightly illusory at this moment. Obviously, he was slightly unable to hold on after forcefully resisting the executing heaven sword 2 times. However, the black hole had already arrived over 1 kilometer behind Yixian. Meanwhile, Yixian smashed his fist forward once more. Bang! The flames in front of him vanished instantly. Yixian raised his head and gazed at the mysterious man in black. He gestured with his right hand, and then a ray of sword radiance flew directly back into the immortal slaying sword gourd. Yixian gazed at the mysterious man in black. "Do you want to continue?" The mysterious man in black slowly clenched his right hand, and a ball of flames suddenly condensed. However, he did not dare to make a move. One more sword strike would be enough to greatly injure his vitality. However, he did not expect that Yixian could consecutively make 2 sword strikes. Looking at the current situation, he was afraid that he could make 2 more sword strikes. Who could withstand this? Yixian sized up the black-clothed man, and then said, "Your Excellency, have you come for the 5th-dimensional treasure, or for me, Yixian?" The man in black said, "The 5th-dimensional treasure." Yixian said with a smile, "Don't you know? The 5th-dimensional treasure has already fallen into the hands of Venerable Sword. If you want it, you can go find Venerable Sword. Why did you come to me?" The man in black looked at Yixian. "I received news that Venerable Sword is still in your northern territory. He has not left." Yixian smiled. "You believe me?" The man in black narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Yixian shook his head and smiled. "Think about it. What kind of person is Venerable Sword? Do you think I have the ability to make him stay? Moreover, what reason does he have to stay in the northern territory? Moreover, if I'm not wrong, the news you received was given to you by Temple, right?" The man in black stared at Yixian without saying anything. Yixian continued, "Don't you know my relationship with Temple? Think about it. If Venerable Sword is really in my northern territory, why doesn't he appear?" Saying this, he shook his head and smiled. "This Temple. They don't give up on killing me, and keep framing me." The man in black was silent. Yixian glanced around and said with a smile, "I won't waste any more time with you. Do you want to make a move or leave? If you want to make a move, I'll call for help." "Call for help?" Hearing this, the man in black's expression changed slightly. He knew that there was a woman in purple behind Yixian. The reason why he made a move just now was because he saw that the woman in purple wasn't there. He wanted to catch Yixian off guard, but he underestimated Yixian's strength. Those 2 slashes had almost severed his body. If the woman in purple joined forces with Yixian, thinking of this, the man in black had the intention to retreat. Yixian suddenly smiled. "Sir, I'll give you a free piece of news. Do you want to hear it?" The man in black looked at Yixian. "Speak." Yixian said, "When Venerable Sword Master left the northern region, people from the Divine Palace immediately came to the northern region. Then I told them the direction, and they went after him. At that time, there were 2 super strong people from the Divine Palace. One of them was even a god, Yuan Xiaodao. However, after about an hour, they suddenly returned to the northern territory and said that Venerable Sword had completely disappeared. Then, they insisted that Venerable Sword was still in the northern territory and hadn't left. Sir, don't you think this is very strange?" The man in black frowned. "You mean that Venerable Sword might have been killed by Temple?" "Impossible. Venerable Sword is very powerful. Even 2 gods might not be able to kill him." Yixian suddenly said, "What about the other 3? What about the other 4? Hearing this, the man in black's pupils shrank. "How is that possible?" Yixian smiled and said, "Sir, you have to understand that this is a 5th-dimensional treasure. This is a 5th-dimensional treasure. Isn't it worth it for the Divine Palace to send so many gods?" Hearing this, the man in black fell silent. Yixian said again, Sir, think about it. Between me and Temple, who is more capable of killing Venerable Sword? Me or Temple? Sir, think about it carefully. After a moment, the man in black said in a deep voice, You mean, Temple killed Venerable Sword and then framed you? Yi Xian, P.S. Late update. Sorry. I slept for a few more minutes. Chapter 791. Inside the black hole, Yi Xian smiled. What do you think, senior? The mysterious man in black was silent for a moment, then asked, Is Sword Venerable really not in your northern region? Yi Xian said indifferently, Senior, I am a swordsman, and a swordsman of the bright state Sword Dao. Do you think I would lie? You should know that we swordsmen pay attention to a clear conscience and maintain our original heart. The mysterious man in black was silent for a moment, then turned around and left. He did not completely trust Yi Xian, but between Yi Xian and the temple he was more willing to trust Yi Xian. As Yi Xian said, Yi Xian was a swordsman. Therefore in his heart, Yi Xian should not lie. After all, he was a super swordsman. This kind of person was usually very arrogant. Why would he lie? This kind of person disdained to lie. After the mysterious man in black left, Yi Xian put away the immortal slaying sword gourd and looked behind him. At this time, the black hole storm was only a few dozen feet behind him. He felt as if he was being torn apart by millions of horses. This power was simply too strong. Yi Xian retreated. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian left the black hole area and came to a starry sky. Looking at the black hole in front of him, Yi Xian was still somewhat afraid. The power of this black hole was not ordinary. Yi Xian glanced around and then disappeared from where he stood. In a vast starry sky, Yuan Xiaodao was flying in the sky. At this time, she had never felt so relaxed before. This was because she had given up on targeting Yi Xian. This was not only giving up on targeting Yi Xian, but also letting go of the obsession in her heart. Letting go of the obsession could make her saber faster and stronger. At this time, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yuan Xiaodao. The woman was dressed in a red dress. Her hair reached her waist, and she had a voluptuous figure. She looked extremely charming. This was a woman that would make any man impulsive. Yuan Xiaodao frowned when he saw who it was. It's you? The woman smiled and said, Accident? Yuan Xiaodao replied, It's indeed a little unexpected. The woman covered her mouth and giggled. Her giggling caused her huge breasts to tremble. It was a spectacular sight. Yuan Xiaodao glanced at the woman's chest. What's so great about them being big? The woman's lips curled up. Are you feeling inferior? Yuan Xiaodao smiled and said, Wuxia, I'll give you a small suggestion on account of our many years of friendship. This Yi Xian is very slippery. If you're not careful, you might lose your virginity instead of taking advantage of him. Lost my virginity? Zhu Sierra suddenly giggled. Yuan Xiaodao, are you trying to kill me with laughter? Why did you lose your virginity? Yuan Xiaodao shrugged. I hope you have fun with him. I'll take my leave now. After saying that, she walked into the distance. At this moment, Zhu Sierra suddenly appeared in front of Yuan Xiaodao. Why did you give up? Yuan Xiaodao smiled and said, Why do you guess? Zhu Sierra looked at Yuan Xiaodao. The higher-ups are very disappointed in you. Yuan Xiaodao replied, So what if they're disappointed? Anyway, I'm not planning to go back. Zhu Sierra frowned. Then where are you going? Yuan Xiaodao looked into the distance and said, Dual World Sky. Dual World Sky. Zhu Sierra frowned. Now? Yuan Xiaodao smiled. But can't I? Zhu Sierra looked at Yuan Xiaodao. I'll say it again. Why should I give up? You're not someone who gives up easily. Not only that, you even suggested the higher-ups to shake hands with Yi Xian. This isn't your style at all. Yuan Xiaodao said softly, I'm a little tired. Anyway, I wish you guys a good time. Also, don't be careless when dealing with that Yi Xian. Otherwise, you might really lose your virginity. After saying that, she disappeared into the distance. On the spot, Zhu Sierra remained silent. Yi Xian. She knew a lot about this person before coming. He was a swordsman. A talented swordsman. A swordsman with many backers. Not only did he have many backers, but they were also very mysterious. This was because Deity's Templar knew nothing about the people behind him. However, Deity's Templar didn't want to give up. Fifth dimension treasure. After a moment of silence, Xianxia said softly, "Looks like I have to change my method." After saying that, she disappeared. Far away in the star field, within a black hole, a ray of sword light suddenly broke out from this black hole. The sword light dispersed. It was Yixian. At this moment, Yixian was in a sorry state. This was because he had passed through more than 10 black holes. At this moment, he suddenly understood one thing, and that was that this four-dimensional universe was very, very big. On the way back, he discovered some other black holes. He did not enter them, but he knew that outside of these black holes, there was definitely an unknown star field. The fourth dimension was very big. Yixian raised his head. Above the fourth dimension, there was still the fifth dimension. The boundless starry sky was endless. Yixian shook his head and returned to the north. The moment he reached the north, a lady in a red dress appeared in front of him. It was Xianxia. Yixian paused. "You are?" Xianxia smiled. "Deity's Templar. My name is Xianxia. King, you can call me Little Xia." Deity's Templar. Yixian was a little surprised. "Miss Zhu, where is Miss Yuan? Where is she?" Xianxia rolled her eyes at Yixian. "Why? Am I not as good as her?" Yixian smiled. "Miss Zhu, if I'm not wrong, you're not here to flirt with me, right? Let's get straight to the point. You have to understand that I, Yixian, am a proper person." "A proper person?" Xianxia giggled. "Most men who claim to be serious are all indecent." Yixian smiled. "Looks like Miss Zhu has no ill intentions towards me for now. What is Miss Zhu's purpose here? Just say it. This way we won't waste any time." Xianxia looked at Yixian. "Venerable sword is in the north, right?" Yixian was about to speak, but suddenly Xianxia's eyes turned pink. The next moment, her eyes were like the vast starry sky. Yixian felt as though he was being sucked in. Yixian's eyes suddenly became a little sluggish. "Venerable sword, wake up." At this moment, a voice rang out in Yixian's head. It was Venerable Sword's voice. Yixian's body shook. His eyes returned to normal as he retreated a few feet. In front of Yixian, Xianxia's eyes flashed with astonishment. "You?" Yixian looked at Xianxia. "What demonic art is this?" Xianxia's lips curled up. "Guess." Yixian raged. "Guess your head." As he finished speaking, he waved his right hand and took out the immortal slaying sword gourd. The next moment, the executing heaven sword flew out from the gourd. Seeing the executing heaven sword, Xianxia's face changed. Her right hand reached out and clenched, returned to silence. Boom! The space in front of her was destroyed. The sword light around Yixian's executing heaven sword was also disappearing bit by bit. At this moment, another sword appeared in Yixian's hand. Soul-suppressing sword. Yixian raised his sword and pointed at Xianxia. "Suppress." Soul-suppressing sword. In the distance, Xianxia's face changed drastically again. At this moment, she felt as if her soul was about to be separated from her body. Without any hesitation, Xianxia waved her hand and retreated explosively. This time, she retreated over 3 kilometers away. After she stopped, her expression instantly became extremely solemn. Yixian looked at Xianxia. "Compared to Miss Yuan, you seem to be quite lacking." Xianxia's lips curled up. "Is that so?" Yixian was about to speak when the space around her suddenly exploded. At this moment, he felt as if his body was about to be dismembered. Yixian suddenly roared with rage. In the next moment, a ray of sword light flashed. A tearing sound resounded. Boundless sword. When Yixian executed this move, Xianxia's face changed drastically. She pushed her hands forward to block. At this moment, the space in front of her actually overlapped with each other. The sword arrived. Rumble. The space in front of Xianxia exploded. However, she had mysteriously disappeared. Xianxia did not disappear. Yixian had also disappeared without a trace. Above the clouds, Zhu Sierra scanned her surroundings. However, she did not feel Yixian's aura. Zhu Sierra frowned. How is this possible? At this moment, she suddenly turned around. The moment she turned, a sword slashed towards her face. Zhu Sierra waved her right hand. Boom! A strong force exploded between the two of them. Very quickly, Yixian retreated hundreds of feet away. Yixian was about to attack when Zhu Sierra suddenly said, "Talk?" Yixian looked at Zhu Sierra and smiled. "Talk about what? Romance?" Zhu Sierra stared at Yixian. "If you don't want the northern region to become the target of everyone in the four-dimensional universe, then we better talk." Yixian shook his head and smiled. "Your temple wants me dead, right?" Zhu Sierra did not speak. Yixian smiled. "Under such circumstances, what do you think we have to talk about?" Zhu Sierra smiled. "Anything can be discussed." Yixian said seriously, "Miss Zhu, I am speaking the truth. Senior Sword Venerable is really not in the northern region. If you want that treasure, you can go find Senior Sword Venerable. It's useless to find me." Zhu Sierra smiled. "You are really cute when you lie. Really, this is the first time I have seen a swordsman lie without batting an eyelid. I am very curious, how do you lie without going against your conscience? Is it because you are thick-skinned?" Yixian, Zhu Sierra smiled. "I will let you give up." As she spoke, she waved her right hand and a light screen appeared in front of Yixian. There was an image on the light screen. It was the image of Yixian and Sword Venerable in the courtyard. The last image was Yixian disappearing with Sword Venerable. However, an hour later, only Yixian appeared in the courtyard. Seeing this, Yixian was silent. Zhu Sierra looked at Yixian and smiled. "What else do you have to say?" Yixian said seriously, "Senior Sword Venerable is really not with me. I can swear." At this moment, Sword Venerable suddenly appeared beside him. "Yixian." Zhu Sierra looked at Sword Venerable, then looked at Yixian. "Swear. Swear it to me. Swear." Chapter 792. Yixian was a little speechless. He did not expect Venerable Sword to come out. Now that he was out, he was in trouble. Venerable Sword looked at Yixian and said apologetically, "Sorry for giving you so much trouble." Yixian smiled. "This is no trouble at all. After all, even without Senior, the temple will not let me off." Venerable Sword nodded and looked at Zhu Sierra. "You are looking for me?" Zhu Sierra looked at Venerable Sword and did not speak. At this moment, Yixian suddenly said, "Don't you want the pagoda? Aren't you looking for Senior Venerable Sword? He is right here. Go ahead and hit him." Zhu Sierra looked at Yixian coldly. "Can you shut up?" Yixian said coldly, "Looks like your temple only knows how to bully the weak." Zhu Sierra ignored Yixian and looked at Venerable Sword. "I am curious, why is Venerable Sword following this Yixian?" Venerable Sword was expressionless. "What has this got to do with you?" Zhu Sierra squinted her eyes and her gaze turned cold. At this moment, Venerable Sword said again, "Isn't your temple looking for the old man? The old man is right here." Zhu Sierra was silent. With her strength, she could not do anything to Venerable Sword. Not to mention that there was still Yixian beside him. Venerable Sword looked at Zhu Sierra. "If there is anything, come and find me. This has nothing to do with little friend Yi, understand?" With that, he turned and disappeared. Back to the prison pagoda. To Venerable Sword, all he wanted to do now was to comprehend his Sword Dao. A breakthrough in his Sword Dao was his biggest goal in this life. As for the fifth dimension, he did not care anymore. Yixian looked at Zhu Sierra. "Miss Zhu, take care. I will not send you off." Zhu Sierra smiled. "Yixian, I am really curious. I am curious why Venerable Sword is following you and even helping you." Yixian smiled and said, "My personal charm, I guess." Zhu Sierra glared at Yixian. "If others knew that this Sword Lord was in your northern region, what do you think would happen?" Yixian shrugged. "What will happen? It was nothing more than a lot of people coming to the northern region. However, I can guarantee you that the one who benefits in the end will definitely not be your Divine Hall, because Senior Sword Master and I will definitely chase after your Divine Hall and fight." With that, he turned around and left. On the spot, Wuxia was silent for a moment before she disappeared. After Yi Xian returned to the northern region, he immediately went into seclusion. Comprehension. After returning from the Nether Hall, he had actually comprehended many things. Now, he was going to completely comprehend these things and turn them into something useful. Cultivate. During this period of time, it was rare for the northern region to be peaceful. This could be said to be his chance. He needed to take advantage of this opportunity to improve his strength. Even though he could now fight evenly with Wuxia, he knew that this was far from enough. Yi Xian went into seclusion. During this period of time, Wuxia did not leave either. She wandered around the city and in the end, she actually wandered all the way to the Immortal Dao sect. This was also Yi Ling's territory. This undoubtedly affected the nerves of all the experts in the northern region. Who didn't know the importance of Yi Ling now? That was Yi Xian's fate. Whoever dared to touch Yi Ling, Yi Xian would undoubtedly go crazy. Xiao Tian'er and the rest were secretly on high alert, ready to act at any time. However, this Wuxia did not make a move against Yi Ling. Not only did she not make a move, she even taught Yi Ling, and in the end, she actually obtained the title of a guest in the Immortal Dao sect. Everyone was astonished. What was going on? During this period of time, the northern region was in the dark. There were more experts around. Obviously, many people were still suspicious of Yi Xian. However, no one dared to make a move against Yi Xian. Because right now, besides the Undying Temple, no one could be 100% sure that Venerable Sword was in the northern region. About half a month later, Yi Xian suddenly walked out of his room. Xianxia and Xianxia had been waiting outside for a long time. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He opened his palm and the Executing Heaven Sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Yi Xian looked at the Executing Heaven Sword in his hand and smiled. Sword. The moment he spoke, two sword intents suddenly swept out from the Executing Heaven Sword. In an instant, one black and one white sword intent enveloped the surroundings. Sword intent. During this period of time, his biggest gain was sword intent. In the past, his sword and sword intent were separate. Sword intent was sword intent and sword was sword. He did not combine the two. But now, he directly combined his sword intent with the Executing Heaven Sword. In the past, he felt that sword intent was an illusory thing. But now, he felt that sword intent had life. Sword intent was born because of him, and he was the sword. By combining sword intent and sword intent, he could make his sword power stronger. In the past, he rarely used sword intent. But now, he found that after he had perfectly combined sword intent and sword intent, the power of his sword skills could be increased by at least 30 to 40%. This improvement was very terrifying. In addition to the improvement of sword intent, during this period of time, he had also absorbed the sword skills and various sword principles contained in the sword manual. These had also greatly improved him. Now, his entire state of mind had quietly changed. He stood there now, without the sharpness that he once had. Reserved. Now, he was like a sword that had returned to its natural state. Of course, there was still some distance from the true return to its natural state. However, he had begun to move in this direction. Because the more a person knew, the more they would be low-key and humble. His current understanding of swordsmanship was no longer the same as that of a young boy. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at the two women. He smiled and said, "What's the matter?" Xianxia nodded. "That Wuxia is very close to Yi Ling." Yi Ling. Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I'll go see her." Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian. "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded. "Is there anything else?" Xianxia said, "There are still many people secretly spying on us. In the beginning, some people were quite subtle. But now, more and more people are acting unscrupulously." Yi Xian nodded. "I'll take care of it." After saying that, he looked up at the sky. The next moment, he directly turned into a sword light and soared into the sky. After a few breaths, more than a dozen bloody heads fell directly from the sky. Seeing this scene, Xianxia and Xianxia were stunned. What was Yi Xian trying to do? In the distant sky, above the clouds, Yi Xian glanced around and smiled slightly. Do you think that my black-yellow great world is easy to bully? Or do you think that I, Yi Xian, am easy to bully? There was no response. Yi Xian suddenly waved his right hand. The executing heaven sword flew out. A few hundred feet away, a head flew directly. Yi Xian glanced around again. Within 3 breaths, if there is anyone who is not from my northern region within a radius of 100,000 miles, kill without mercy. Ha! At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from afar. King Yi, how arrogant! As the voice fell, a middle-aged man walked out. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. This time, he directly used the immeasurable sword. When he sensed the power of Yi Xian's sword, the middle-aged man's face instantly changed. King Yi, please have mercy. Before the middle-aged man finished speaking, his head flew directly. Yi Xian glanced around coldly. Is there anyone else? There was no response. Yi Xian softly said, I have been too kind to you all, so you all think that I am easy to bully. All of you have come to find trouble with me again and again. With that said, he glanced coldly at the surroundings again. Now, get out of my sight. Immediately. Some of the auras in the surroundings began to retreat. Soon, the people in hiding all left the northern region. In the air, Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and directly flew to the Immortal Dao sect. When they saw Yi Xian, the entire Immortal Dao sect was in an uproar. The current Yi Xian was very famous in the black-yellow Great World. Not just because he was the current master of the Xuanhuan Great World, but also because he was a swordsman, and a young swordsman at that. There were many legends about Yi Xian in the black-yellow Great World. Soon, more and more Immortal Dao sect experts arrived at the Immortal Dao Temple. As soon as Yi Xian arrived, Yi Ling ran out. When she saw Yi Xian, Yi Ling smiled brightly. Big brother! With that, she flew toward Yi Xian. When she arrived before Yi Xian and was about to throw herself into Yi Xian's arms, she suddenly thought of something and quickly stopped. She looked to the side and saw that countless Immortal Dao sect disciples had gathered. Yi Ling secretly looked around and then grabbed Yi Xian's arm. Big brother, why are you here? Yi Xian smiled. Naturally, I came to see you. How is it? Is everything going smoothly here? Yi Ling nodded. Everything is going smoothly. There are now more than 1,000 people in the Immortal Dao sect. Moreover, there are 7 ascending ice realm experts. Not only that, but there are also 2 unknown realm experts. Yi Xian laughed. Amazing, amazing. He naturally knew about these 2 unknown realm experts because he had sent them to protect Yi Ling. However, after coming to the Immortal Dao sect, they truly liked this place. This was because the benefits here were really good. This was naturally because of Yi Xian. The entire Northern Territory and the Black-Yellow Chronicle took great care of the Immortal Dao sect. When the Immortal Dao sect disciples went out, others would give them some face. This was because everyone knew how much Yi Xian doted on his little sister. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly smiled. Big brother, I met a big sister. Come, with that, she turned to look. Not far away, a woman in a red dress slowly walked over. She had a charming smile on her face. This person was Wuxia. Wuxia walked to Yi Ling's side and gently rubbed Yi Ling's head. Then she looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Congratulations, King Yi, your strength has increased a lot. Yi Xian smiled. Many thanks. Wuxia looked at Yi Xian and sent a voice transmission. I heard that you care about your little sister a lot. But aren't you afraid that I will target her? Yi Xian smiled. Wuxia's eyes narrowed. You think I don't dare? Yi Xian shook his head. It's because you won't. Wuxia was slightly startled. But Yi Xian said softly. The pride of the strong. You and Miss Yuan are both top experts. Although I am your enemy, I know that you have your pride. You will not do such despicable things. Hearing this, Wuxia fell silent. P.S. Speaking of which, do you think that in the entire universe, there are only us Earthlings? Recently, when I read about the universe, I suddenly realized that our Earth is very, very small. No, it's our solar system that is very, very small. How big is the universe? Chapter 793. The Pride of the Strong. Yi Xian realized a problem. Up until now, the opponents he had met rarely used such despicable methods to deal with him. Whether it was Yuan Xiaodao or the other experts, none of them had said anything about targeting Yi Xian's family and friends. But because these people had cultivated to this level, they had their own pride. Of course, not everyone would be like this. But now, the majority of the enemies did not say that they could not deal with Yi Xian, so they targeted Yi Ling. Although the number of enemies was increasing, and they were getting stronger, the quality of the enemies was also getting higher. Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but shake his head and smile. Was this a good thing? In front of Yi Xian, Zhu Xier shook her head and smiled. She looked at Yi Ling and said, "I want to have a chat with your brother." Yi Ling looked at the two of them and said, "All right." After saying this, she turned and left. Yi Xian and Zhu Xier found a place to sit. There were only the two of them. Zhu Xier said softly, "King Yi, I will not beat around the bush. This time, I represent Deity's Templar and want to have a chat with you." Yi Xian smiled and said, "You did not intend to talk at the start, right?" Zhu Xier shook her head and said, "No, after a god was killed, we already wanted to talk with you. But we knew that talking with you would not have any results. Because you will not give up the fifth-dimensional treasure. So, we placed our hopes on Yuan Xiaodao. But she gave up. Not only did she give up, she suggested that we not target you anymore. Deity's Templar still holds her words in high regard because we are very clear of her strength. Since she chose to give up, she must have met with something." After saying this, she looked at Yi Xian and said, "We have no choice but to talk now. What about you? Are you willing to talk?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "If I am not wrong, if I am not willing, then you will have to pay any price. Am I right?" Zhu Xier nodded, "Yes, because we have no other choice." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Just because that fifth-dimensional treasure can bring you guys to the fifth dimension?" Zhu Xier pointed at the starry sky far away. "Do you know how many geniuses have fallen in the dual realm sky? Many, 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 so many that the fifth dimension of the dual realm sky is filled with the corpses of all kinds of monstrous geniuses." As she said that, she slowly closed her eyes. Many people have reached the end of the fourth dimension. If they can't break through, they will die of old age. An expert, a super expert, will eventually die of old age. Can you understand how they feel? Yi Xian softly said, "So this treasure of the fifth dimension is their hope, right?" Zhu Xier nodded, "Yes. Of course, currently, only my divine palace knows that the fifth-dimensional treasure is in your hands." Yi Xian was silent. Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian. "Can we work together?" Yi Xian said, "How?" Zhu Xier said solemnly, "We want to invite you to the headquarters of Divine Palace, which is the ruins of God. One of our seniors wants to personally see this treasure of yours." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Can I come back if I go?" Zhu Xier nodded, "Yes." Yi Xian shook his head, "I don't believe you. That is your territory." Zhu Xier said, "Is there a difference if he comes or you go?" Yi Xian was silent. Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian and said, "We don't want to be enemies with you because we don't have full confidence in dealing with the person behind you. Even if we snatch the treasure from you, the revenge of the person behind you will be too much for us to handle. So we choose to work with you. It's a win-win situation for everyone. We just want to understand the fifth dimension and go there. If our goal doesn't conflict with yours, you can choose to work with us because there are many benefits." "Benefits?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "What kind of benefits?" Zhu Xier smiled and said, "For example, we can help you solve some of your problems." Yi Xian frowned and said, "What problems?" Zhu Xier looked at the sky and said, "Do you know how many life realm experts are hiding in the dark?" Yi Xian shook his head. He really didn't know. He couldn't sense experts of the life realm yet. Zhu Xier smiled and said, "No less than 6. 6. Yi Xian's face darkened. So there were so many of them. Zhu Xier said again, we can help you block them. Not only that, we can help you improve. Of course, in return, you need to help us understand the fifth dimension treasure. Don't worry, we won't use force anymore because the treasure has already recognized you as its owner. Our goal is to understand the fifth dimension through it. If possible, we can use it to enter the fifth dimension. Of course, this depends on the situation and we won't force it. Yi Xian was silent. Zhu Xier smiled and said, how about it? Yi Xian said softly, what you said is very good. However, have you ever thought of a problem? If I go to your godly empty land, I will be meat on your chopping board. Isn't it up to you to decide how you want to cut me? Zhu Xier nodded and said, you are right. Therefore it is up to you. As she said this, she looked at the sky and smiled and said, let me tell you something. There will be more and more people coming here. Yi Xian smiled and said, I will go with you to the godly empty land. Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian and said, are you serious? Yi Xian nodded and said, I am serious. However, I have two conditions. Zhu Xier said, tell me. Yi Xian said, first, I need 2 life realm experts to guard the black-yellow great world for me. I want this place to be safe. Is that okay? Zhu Xier was silent for a while and said, okay. We will send people to guard this place. 2 life realm experts are more than enough. After you leave, those big shots will leave as well, and those who stay won't be a threat to life realm experts. She looked at Yi Xian and said, what about the second condition? Yi Xian smiled and said, the second condition is that I need the purple origin energy to restore some of the black-yellow great world's purple origin energy. He knew that the purple origin energy of the black-yellow great world was controlled by the temple. Although Xiao Linger could concoct the earth immortal pill, it could not be used by all cultivators. One had to know that the ingredients to concoct the earth immortal pill were very precious and it was difficult to concoct them in large quantities. Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian and said, you are quite nice to the people of this world. Yi Xian smiled and said, can I? Zhu Xier nodded and said, yes, we can send some purple origin energy to this black-yellow great world. Yi Xian nodded and said, give me 1 day. Zhu Xier said, okay. Then she got up and left. After Zhu Xier left, Yi Xian was silent for a while and then he walked towards the main hall of the Immortal Path sect. For the rest of the day, Yi Xian accompanied Yi Ling. Now, besides cultivating, he spent the rest of his time with Yi Ling. He would cherish every moment he spent with Yi Ling. He still felt that he owed his sister a little, because the time he spent with her was far too little. Moreover, because of the World Prison Pagoda, Yi Ling had suffered a lot with him. On the second day, Yi Xian came to Xiao Qi's room. At this moment, Xiao Qi's room was very quiet and there was no movement. However, Xiao Qi still had no intention of coming out of seclusion. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian turned to Jiang Jiao and Shengguan Xianer and said, after I leave, Xiao Qi will temporarily take over everything in the black-yellow great world. At that time, there will be 2 life realm powerhouses hiding in the dark. If you encounter any problems, you can ask them to help. Shengguan Xianer nodded slightly, understood. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian and asked, are you really going to the Divine Hall? Yi Xian smiled, could it be fake? Shengguan Xianer said solemnly, this might be a plot by the Divine Hall. Yi Xian smiled slightly, it's okay. I have to go because if I don't, the Divine Hall won't let this go. The others won't let this go either. I have to go and attract their attention. If he didn't leave, the black-yellow great world would never have a day of peace. Although he had given up the World Prison Pagoda, it was obvious that it had only solved the immediate problem. He didn't expect that the Sword Saint would bring the World Prison Pagoda back to find him and even live in the World Prison Pagoda. It had to be said that the world was really unpredictable. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Shengguan Xianer's expression became a little complicated. Following Yi Xian till now, she realized that Yi Xian was actually quite bitter. He basically didn't have a single moment of rest. Yi Xian looked at Jiang Jiao and said, the 2 of you have to be careful. This place is a little complicated and there are many people with intentions. Don't be careless and underestimate the enemy. Understand? Jiang Jiu nodded. You have to be careful when you go to the ruins of God. Yi Xian smiled. Don't worry, I still have the ability to escape. After explaining some matters to the two girls, Yi Xian came to Enlanxio's courtyard. At this moment, Enlanxio hadn't come out of seclusion. After eating that Earth celestial pill, Enlanxio had been in seclusion until now. He knew that be it Seven or Enlanxio, when he saw them again, their strength would definitely have earth-shattering changes. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian turned around and left. An hour later, Yi Xian came to the vast starry sky and Zhu Xie had been waiting for a long time. Yi Xian smiled. Lady Zhu, please. Zhu Xie nodded. King Yi, forgive me for being straightforward. Having too many ties might not be a good thing. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Does Lady Zhu have any relatives? Zhu Xie said indifferently, Of course. However, some have already turned to dust. Yi Xian smiled. Lady Zhu doesn't have anyone that you care about? Zhu Xie smiled. What are you trying to say? Yi Xian said softly, If a person doesn't have a few friends and no relatives that they care about, this person should be quite pitiful. As for the ties that Lady Zhu mentioned, forgive me for being straightforward. When our parents gave birth to us, weren't we ties and troubles for them when we were young? Just as Zhu Xie was about to speak, something strange happened. The space around the two of them collapsed and at the same time, countless blood-red chains appeared around the two of them. Chapter 794. This sudden change caused Yi Xian and Zhu Xie to frown. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Xie. You're men. Zhu Xie replied solemnly, Don't think too much. They are not from deity's Templar. Not from deity's Templar. Yi Xian frowned. If they were not from deity's Templar, then who were they? At this moment, the space around him and Zhu Xie suddenly turned illusory. Those strange red chains. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Xie. The latter waved her hand and a strong force was emitted from her hand. Rumble. In an instant, the space around them started to tremble. But the red chains were not damaged at all. The red chains were like a cage, trapping the two of them in place. Seeing this, Zhu Xie frowned. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Call for help. Zhu Xie looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said indifferently, Since the other party knows about us but still dares to attack, do you think they are ordinary people? Hurry up and call for help. Zhu Xie looked around. Who would have thought that just as deity's Templar formed an alliance with you, someone would jump out? Yi Xian did not expect this as well. Someone had been waiting in the dark for an opportunity. Zhu Xie said solemnly, My men, there is still an hour left. We have to hold on for an hour. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, the blood-red chains suddenly started shuttling back and forth. Following that, a powerful force surged towards Yi Xian and Zhu Xie. Zhu Xie's face changed. This is a barrier. As she said, she looked at Yi Xian. Use your sword. Executing Heaven's Sword. Yi Xian nodded. He pulled out his sword and slashed. The Executing Heaven's Sword slashed out. Boom. In front of Yi Xian, a blood-red chain was broken. Zhu Xie's expression eased up slightly when she saw this scene. But in the next moment, her expression became extremely unsightly. Because the blood-red chain that had been severed had automatically healed itself. Not only that, but the blood in her and Yi Xian's bodies also began to tremble at this moment, as if their blood vessels were about to burst open. Yi Xian frowned. Targeting blood? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Soon, the blood in his body gradually calmed down. What a joke! His blood was alive, and it had a temper. How could it be so easily affected by other people's blood? However, Zhu Xie's face was getting uglier by the second. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Xie. Miss Zhu, do you need help? Zhu Xie replied indifferently, No need. As soon as she finished speaking, her hands suddenly pressed down. Rumble. A strong force swept out from her body. In an instant, the blood in her body returned to normal. Yi Xian was just about to speak when the space around him and Zhu Xie suddenly turned into a sea of blood. Not only that, the blood-red chains were slicing towards him and Zhu Xie like blades. Rumble. Around them, the endless starry skies began to tremble violently. It was as if there was a huge earthquake. It was incomparably shocking. Zhu Xie's eyes flashed with seriousness. She looked at Yixian. "Be careful." With that, she clasped her hands together. Boom! An invisible force suddenly flashed out from her body. This force blocked the sea of blood around them. But at this moment, blood-red ghost faces suddenly appeared from within the sea of blood. These ghost faces were malevolent, and they howled and roared like evil spirits from the depths of hell. Beside Yixian, Zhu Xie's face changed. You are the blood ancestor." Yixian looked at Zhu Xie. "Blood ancestor?" Zhu Xie said solemnly, "An expert not weaker than venerable sword." "Not weaker than venerable sword." Yixian's face turned solemn. He was very clear of venerable sword strength. Although venerable sword was only a life realm expert, he was definitely not an ordinary life realm expert. After all, even within the same realm, there were differences in strength. And this blood ancestor was definitely not an ordinary life realm expert. Otherwise, Zhu Xie wouldn't be so afraid. Zhu Xie stared into the distance. "Could it be that you also want that fifth-dimensional treasure?" At this moment, a laugh came from the sea of blood. Who doesn't want that fifth-dimensional treasure? But this time, the old man is here for the bloodline of this little brat beside you. For Yixian's bloodline? Zhu Xie looked at Yixian, a little confused. Yixian was also a little confused. For his bloodline? Blood ancestor laughed. "Rumor has it that King Ye's bloodline is extraordinary. Seeing it today, it is indeed true. Your bloodline is not affected by my blood technique at all. It seems that it is not an ordinary bloodline." Yixian looked in front of him. "Are you here for my bloodline?" Blood ancestor laughed. "Yes, King. Don't resist. In my blood array, not to mention the two of you, even the lady in purple behind you can't do anything." Yixian said solemnly, "What do you want?" Zhu Xie, who was at the side, suddenly said, "He wants to devour your bloodline. This is how he gets stronger. The better the bloodline, the more valuable it is to him." "Devour my bloodline." Yixian was silent. Zhu Xie said, "If you have any trump cards, don't hide them." Yixian looked at Zhu Xie. "Lady Zhu, you are a super expert of Undying Temple. Shouldn't you be the one to perform now?" Zhu Xie was silent for a moment. Then she waved her right hand and a full moon flew out from her palm. But in the next moment, this full moon was swallowed by countless blood faces. Zhu Xie said solemnly, "In this blood array, I can't do anything to him." As she spoke, she looked at Blood Ancestor. "You must have been here for a long time. But what surprised me is that Undying Temple didn't know anything about it." Blood Ancestor laughed. "Do you think Undying Temple is omnipotent?" Ha! As Blood Ancestor laughed, a blood shadow suddenly pounced at Yixian. Zhu Xie's face changed. She was about to attack when countless blood faces appeared around her. Then, like a tidal wave, they drowned her. In this short time, the blood shadow was already in front of Yixian. In the next moment, Yixian saw a face. This blood face belonged to Blood Ancestor. Blood Ancestor laughed malevolently. "Stop struggling." As he spoke, he pounced at Yixian. Yixian did not struggle. He allowed Blood Ancestor to pounce into his body. The moment Blood Ancestor entered Yixian's body, a blood light swept out from Yixian's body. At the same time, Yixian's eyes turned into a sea of blood. "Ha!" At this time, Blood Ancestor's voice suddenly sounded in Yixian's mind. "It is indeed a top-quality bloodline." Top quality, ha! His laughter was filled with excitement and even a trace of madness. This was because he had not seen such a top-quality bloodline in a long time. No, he had never seen such a top-quality bloodline before. At this time, the bloodline in Yixian's body suddenly trembled. In the next moment, a powerful bloodline power rushed towards Blood Ancestor's blood. The crazy demon bloodline was starting to retaliate. At this time, Blood Ancestor's disdainful voice sounded in Yixian's mind again. Still want to retaliate? What a joke, what a joke. Suddenly, the blood ancestor's voice became frightened. How is this possible? Impossible? What kind of bloodline is this? Ah, screams kept ringing in Yi Xian's mind. After a while, blood ancestor's voice disappeared completely. The aura in Yi Xian's body skyrocketed at this moment. The speed of the increase was extremely shocking, like a volcano suddenly erupting. Boom, boom. The sea of blood around him began to rush towards Yi Xian. Absorb. Yi Xian was still absorbing the blood crazily. No, it was not Yi Xian who was absorbing, but his bloodline itself. He could not control it anymore. After devouring the blood ancestor, he wanted to stop. The energy was too terrifying, and his body could not hold it anymore. However, the power of his bloodline did not want to stop. It was not that he did not want to stop, but that he could not stop. His blood was still madly absorbing, and he could not stop it at all. Once the power of his bloodline was activated, it would no longer be under his control. After devouring the blood ancestor, the power of his bloodline was so strong that Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He was completely dumbfounded now. He did not know to what extent his blood had reached, but he knew that if this continued, he would be toyed to death by his own blood. Because the skin around his body was already starting to crack. His physical body could no longer withstand the power of his bloodline. Who would believe this? His physical body could not withstand the power of his bloodline. The problem was that after devouring the blood ancestor, the bloodline was not satisfied. It still wanted to devour the sea of blood around him. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly roared, "Stop, stop now, I can't hold it anymore." From afar, Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian with a face full of confusion. What was going on? She was also a little confused now. Boom. At this time, a strong blood radiance suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body, and this strong blood radiance sent Zhu Xier flying a few hundred feet away. After Zhu Xier stopped, she looked at Yi Xian not far away, her eyes filled with disbelief. This? How is this possible? From afar, Yi Xian's aura was still rising crazily, and the sea of blood around him was almost completely absorbed by him. However, his body's condition was getting worse. His blood was getting stronger, but this bloodline did not care about his physical body at all. Yi Xian suddenly roared angrily, "If you don't stop, I will be toyed to death by you." However, the bloodline did not stop, and at this time, many parts of his body had already split open, but no blood flowed out, which was very strange. At this time, Yi Xian fell straight down, his eyes filled with confusion. This daddy is going to be toyed to death by myself. P.S. Chapter 795. At this moment, he really felt that he was finished. Because this bloodline had no intention of stopping. Was it a demon? This guy only cared about himself and not him. At this moment, his blood suddenly stopped flowing and then calmed down. At this moment, Yi Xian was already half dead. Very tragic. His corporeal body was completely shattered, and he was just short of falling apart. Zhu Xier sized up Yi Xian and her eyes flashed with doubt. Where was the blood ancestor? This was her question. She had seen the blood ancestor enter Yi Xian's body with her own eyes. But now, she could not feel the blood ancestor's aura. Gone? Thinking of this, Zhu Xier's face turned ugly. Moments later, she took out a dark purple crystal and fed it to Yi Xian. Soon, Yi Xian's aura recovered a little. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. "I'm not dead yet?" Zhu Xier smiled. "What do you think?" Yi Xian took a deep breath and took out a white jade bottle. He opened it and drank it in one gulp. Spring of life. As the spring of life entered his body, Yi Xian's body started to recover at an extremely fast rate. Spring of life. Zhu Xier's eyes flashed with surprise. "You actually have such a divine item. How did you get it?" Yi Xian said, "I picked it up." With that, he took out another bottle and drank it because he felt that one bottle of Spring of Life's recovery was a little slow. Zhu Xier's face turned ugly. "You drink this like water? Do you know how precious this Spring of Life is?" Even a life-breaking realm expert would find it hard to get a drop. At this moment, Yi Xian took out another bottle and drank it. Zhu Xier's face froze. After drinking 3 bottles of Spring of Life, Yi Xian instantly felt much more comfortable because he had recovered 50% to 60%. Zhu Xier stared at Yi Xian. Did you kill the Tree of Life? Yi Xian looked at Zhu Xier. What are you thinking about? He and I were good friends. When I left, he gave me a little of the Spring of Life. Zhu Xier was a little angry. You are friends with it? How could it know you? How could he be your friend? Yi Xian was baffled. Why can't we be friends? He and I are very good friends. Zhu Xier nodded. All right. I don't care if you guys are friends or not. Let me ask you again, where is the blood ancestor? The blood ancestor? Yi Xian blinked. He's gone. Zhu Xier suddenly raged. Yi Xian, do I look like an idiot to you? Yi Xian was speechless. Zhu Xier glared at Yi Xian. What's wrong with him? Yi Xian was silent. Zhu Xier took a deep breath and asked, Is he dead? Yi Xian said with a smile, Guess. Zhu Xier looked deeply at Yi Xian. You're really capable. Such a strong expert was killed by you without a trace. At this moment, she was a little more wary of Yi Xian. This Yi Xian was too mysterious. She was very clear about the blood ancestor's strength. He was an expert comparable to the sword Venerable. Yet he was gone without a trace. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Zhu, can you wait for me? After I recuperate, we will set off for the ruins of God. Zhu Xier said solemnly, Is he really dead? Yi Xian nodded. Dead? He can't be more dead than dead. Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian. How did you do it? Yi Xian said with a smile. To tell you the truth, I really didn't do anything. He killed himself. This was the truth. If the blood ancestor had fought him head-on, he definitely wouldn't have been able to win. But the blood ancestor was arrogant and came to devour his bloodline. Was his bloodline that easy to devour? That was a bloodline that even he couldn't handle. One had to admit that the power of this bloodline was too sick. Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian. You recuperate first. With that, she retreated to the side. Yi Xian sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. Although he devoured the blood ancestor, he realized that he didn't change at all. There was no change at all, not even the slightest bit stronger. This was something that he couldn't understand. After a while, Yi Xian seemed to understand. This time, the power of the bloodline was stronger. It had nothing to do with him. That's not right. It should be said that the power of the bloodline was more terrifying than before. But his cultivation level didn't increase at all. And if he wanted to obtain the power of the bloodline, he had to activate it first. But if he didn't activate it, the power of the bloodline would be useless. To put it simply, the bloodline was like an individual. Of course, this individual was also a part of Yi Xian. This was because the bloodline depended on him to survive. But he still couldn't fully control this bloodline. Especially after the bloodline absorbed the blood ancestor, it became even more terrifying. What level had this bloodline reached? He didn't know. He didn't dare to activate it. Because before he absorbed the blood ancestor, he already couldn't control it. And now, after absorbing the blood ancestor, he didn't know what level the bloodline had reached. Therefore, he didn't dare to activate it. If he wasn't careful, he could be killed by his own bloodline. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. This bloodline was too weird. His intuition told him that this bloodline had reached an extremely terrifying level. Once he activated this bloodline, either his enemies died, or he died. Or everyone died together. Moments later, Yi Xian stood up. He looked at the storage ring in his hand. This was what he had obtained from the blood ancestor. But he couldn't open this storage ring now. Because there were 3 restrictions in this storage ring, he didn't dare to force it open. Because if he did, he might cause the storage ring to self-destruct. And he didn't trust Zhu Xie. Therefore, he could only temporarily give up on the things in the storage ring. Yi Xian kept the storage ring and walked to Zhu Xie's side. He smiled. Miss Zhu, let's go. Zhu Xie looked at Yi Xian. Have you rested enough? Yi Xian nodded. Almost. Wuxia hesitated and asked, King Yi, do you have a lot of the spring of life? Yi Xian said with a straight face, No, I just drank up all of my stock. Really? Wuxia looked at Yi Xian, I won't take it for free. How about I buy a bottle from you? Yi Xian shook his head, I don't have it. I really don't have it. Wuxia said solemnly, half a bottle. How about it? Yi Xian was about to speak when Wuxia said, I'm willing. Yi Xian was shocked. You're willing to marry me? Wuxia suddenly waved her right hand. Boom. Yi Xian was sent flying hundreds of feet away. After Yi Xian stopped, Wuxia was about to attack again. Yi Xian quickly said, I'm just joking. Wuxia stopped. She looked at Yi Xian coldly and turned to leave. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Wuxia. He smiled and waved his right hand. 2 white jade bottles appeared in front of Wuxia. Wuxia looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said with a smile, These 2 bottles are for Miss Zhu. Wuxia raised her eyebrows. For me? Yi Xian nodded. For you. Wuxia stared at Yi Xian. Do you know how precious this is? Yi Xian nodded. I know. Wuxia asked. Then why are you giving it to me? Yi Xian smiled. Why? You don't want it? Wuxia kept the 2 bottles of Spring of Life and looked at Yi Xian. I'll remember this favor. Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything. A moment later, the 2 continued on their journey to the ruins of gods, which was also the real lair of God Templar. 2 days later, Yi Xian found that there were suddenly more powerful auras around him. Yi Xian frowned. At this time, Wuxia suddenly said, It's one of us. Yi Xian nodded slightly and said with a smile, Escort me? Wuxia said, You can say so. As she said, she looked at Yi Xian. Let me ask you something. You don't have to say it. Yi Xian smiled. Ask away. Wuxia said solemnly, That lady behind you, how strong is she? Lady in plain dress. Right now, everyone in the 4-dimensional universe was curious about this woman. What kind of expert was she? Yi Xian thought about it and said, How strong she is, I don't know either. Wuxia stared at Yi Xian. You don't know either? Yi Xian nodded. I don't know. As he said, he looked at Wuxia. Miss Zhu, can you tell me how your God Templar sees her? Wuxia was silent for a moment before asking, Unfathomable. Unfathomable. Yi Xian said with a smile. Then why are you still trying to kill me? Wuxia looked at Yi Xian. That's what we think. If she is really undefeatable, why didn't she just kill her way into our God Templar? But she didn't do so, so there are only 2 reasons. First, she's being held back by something. Second, although she is strong, she isn't as strong as we thought. She doesn't dare to come to our God Templar because she is afraid of us. So, we bet on the second reason. Yi Xian was silent. Wuxia continued, but as we investigated further, and with the appearance of those people behind you, we felt that we might have underestimated her. Yi Xian smiled. I also feel that you have underestimated her. Although he didn't know how strong the lady in plain dress was, he knew that she wasn't someone ordinary people could fight against. After all, how strong was the big shot in the 8th level of the World Prison Pagoda? But wasn't she also afraid of the lady in plain dress? From his point of view, this God Templar couldn't even compare to the 8th level. Wuxia said softly, I understand Yuan Xiaodao a little now. After interacting with Yi Xian, she also realized that Yi Xian was a little terrifying. Putting everything else aside, she still didn't know how the blood ancestor died not long ago. He was a life realm expert after all. Chapter 796. The Land of the Ruins of God. Yi Xian looked up. Not far away, there was a boundless mountain range. The mountain range was connected, and he couldn't see the end of it. Above this mountain range, Yi Xian could faintly see some figures. Yi Xian looked at Wuxia, and the latter said softly, This is the land of the ruins of God, one of the strongest powers in the 4th dimension. Yi Xian nodded. Miss Zhu, how is the interior of your temple? Zhu Xier smiled. You want to ask, since we have peace advocates, do we also have war advocates, right? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. Zhu Xier said, there are war advocates. Hearing this, Yi Xian turned and left. At this moment, Zhu Xier stood in front of Yi Xian, and she rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. What are you afraid of? Didn't I tell you that there are peace advocates? Yi Xian thought about it, and then he said, I feel that once I go in, it will be very difficult for me to come out. Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian. I will protect you. Yi Xian was slightly surprised. Miss Zhu, are you serious? Zhu Xier nodded. Don't worry, even if we are enemies, I won't use such despicable methods to deal with you. If we can't come to an agreement, I will protect you from the land of the ruins of God. Yi Xian hesitated, and then he asked, Are you sure you can protect me? Zhu Xier smiled. I can. Her words were filled with great confidence. Yi Xian glanced at Zhu Xier. This Zhu Xier's status in the temple is definitely not simple. Zhu Xier said, Let's go. After she finished speaking, she walked towards the distance. Shrugging his shoulders, Yi Xian followed him. In a short while, the two of them arrived at the peak of a mountain. On this mountain peak, there was an ancient city that floated. The city wasn't big, but it was filled with an ancient aura, and it had existed for a long time. Divine Ruins City. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Xier and asked, Miss Zhu, does your deity's Templar also have a patriarch? Zhu Xier laughed. Yes, but our Grandmaster definitely doesn't know who you are. You can forget about it. Yi Xian was speechless. Zhu Xier said, Let's go. After that, she led Yi Xian into the city. After entering the city, Yi Xian discovered that there were many humans in the city. Zhu Xier laughed. Surprised? Yi Xian said solemnly, Didn't you want to exterminate the human race? Zhu Xier smiled. Human King told you? Yi Xian nodded. Zhu Xier laughed. Once upon a time, we did have a huge conflict with the human race of the black-yellow great world. But later on, we no longer bothered to be enemies with them. Do you know why? Yi Xian shook his head. Zhu Xier said softly, because we've left the Xian Huang great world. We've discovered an even bigger universe. We've discovered the diversity of the universe. In this universe, there's not only the human race, but also the demon race as well as some foreign races. As she said, she looked at Yi Xian. Everywhere, there will be conflict. Back then, if we weren't strong enough, we would be the ones destroyed. Moreover, the human race of the black-yellow great world wasn't destroyed entirely because of us. There were internal conflicts among the human race. Back then, it was the internal conflicts of the human race that gave us the opportunity. Yi Xian was silent. Zhu Xier laughed. Don't think too much. The conflict between the celestial race and the human race is like a battle between two powers. Those are all past conflicts and have nothing to do with you. Now, we won't go against your black-yellow great world. After that, she looked into the distance. We're here. Yi Xian looked over. Not far in front of him was a bamboo forest. In front of the bamboo forest, an old man sat. This old man wore a hemp robe and his hair was tied up. He was fishing. Yi Xian asked, Your boss? Zhu Xier nodded. Yes. Go. Yi Xian hesitated and said, If he makes a move, what are the chances of me escaping? Zhu Xier laughed. Guess. Yi Xian shrugged and walked over. At this time, the old man looked at Yi Xian. Sit. Yi Xian sat beside the old man. The old man said, Let's fish together. As he said that, a fishing rod appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, I don't know how to. The old man laughed. At the start, I thought you were full of vigor and vigor. But now that I see you, you really surprised me. Because the current you're still sharp and hot-blooded, but you've hidden it. Peak of the bright realm. How rare. Yi Xian laughed. I'm still not senior's match. The old man shook his head. Why compete with me? If you really want to compete, you should compete with me when I was your age. At your age, I should be inferior to you. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, actually, I'm a little surprised too. I didn't think that I would be sitting here talking to deity's Templar like this. The old man said softly, The strength of the person behind you forced us to talk to you like this. If you were alone, you wouldn't even have the chance to come here and talk to me. Yixian laughed. Senior is very straightforward. The old man looked at Yixian. You're a smart person. It's better to be straightforward with you. Yixian nodded. Senior, can you represent deities Templar? The old man nodded. Yes. Yixian laughed. Miss Zhu said that deities Templar wants to cooperate with me. What kind of cooperation? Senior, just say it. The old man looked at Yixian. Can I take a look at this pagoda? Yixian nodded. No problem. After saying that, he opened his palm and the world prison pagoda appeared in his hand. Yixian didn't have any misgivings and directly handed the world prison pagoda to the old man. The old man didn't take it. He looked at the world prison pagoda, a complicated look in his eyes. It's indeed a fifth-dimensional item. After saying that, he looked at Yixian. Little friend, you're really lucky. Yixian shook his head. It's not all good. With this thing around, it's not easy for me to live all these years. The old man laughed. Fortune and misfortune go hand in hand. Yixian nodded. Senior, you can tell us how we can cooperate. The old man said, cooperation is very simple. Little friend, tell us everything you know about this pagoda and let us understand the fifth dimension. In return, we can provide little friend with a lot of help. Yixian was a little surprised. That's simple? The old man laughed. Of course, if little friend is willing to give this item to us, it's also possible. Yixian passed it to the old man. Here, this is for you. The old man looked at Yixian. Are you serious? Yixian nodded. I'm serious. The old man looked deeply at Yixian, then laughed. Looks like the karma brought by this item isn't ordinary. Yixian laughed. Senior doesn't want it? The old man looked at the world prison pagoda, a complicated look in his eyes. Little friend, go and rest for a while. Yixian laughed, then stood up and left. After Yixian left, Wuxia appeared by the old man's side. Along with Wuxia, a young man appeared. The young man wore a white robe, and there was a black mark between his brows. The old man said softly, Zhu Qing, what do you think? The white-robed man pondered for a moment, then said, he said that he would give that item to grandfather, and it doesn't seem like he was joking. Then there's a problem. Does he really not want this item? The old man laughed. Then do you think I should accept it or not? Zhu Qing spoke in a low voice. You shouldn't. The old man looked at Zhu Qing. Why? Zhu Qing spoke in a low voice. Because grandfather didn't accept it. The old man laughed. You're really crafty. As he spoke, he glanced at the direction Yixian had left in, and there was a complicated look in his eyes. My pantheon can't accept that item. Zhu Qing asked, why? The old man spoke softly, because I can't see through the karma of that item. It's a fifth-dimensional treasure, so it definitely carries some unknown karma with it. If I accept it, then that karma will contaminate me. Some karma can be accepted and some cannot. Zhu Qing spoke in a low voice. Grandfather, you can sense the karma of that item? The old man laughed. If I can't even sense that, then wouldn't I have lived all these years for nothing? Zhu Qing asked. Then what should we do now? The old man spoke softly. Work with him, and after we're done, let him leave. I'm starting to panic if he stays here. Zhu Qing frowned. Why? The old man laughed. I'm afraid of being implicated. This item's karma is too great. I don't know how he can endure it, but it's definitely not something we can handle. Wuxia spoke in a low voice. Let him leave after we're done working with him? The old man nodded. We have to be quick. There was a hint of seriousness in his eyes. The moment he saw the world prison pagoda, he completely gave up on the idea of taking it. Such a divine item was not something the pantheon could possess. One could be ambitious, but they had to weigh their own capabilities. If they forcefully took such a divine item, the pantheon would surely be destroyed. At this moment, Wuxia spoke. I've investigated. Anyone who has designs on this pagoda has basically not had a good ending. Of course, that's except for Yixian. However, his situation isn't that great either. Ever since he came out of that small world, he's been hunted. But he's still alive, and his enemies are basically all dead. The old man suddenly spoke. That blood ancestor really died at his hands? Xianxia nodded. Yes, and he died without knowing why. The old man nodded. This little guy is not simple. Then he paused and continued, send down my orders. No one in the divine city is to provoke him. He's now our pantheon's esteemed guest. Also, bring him to our God's Book Palace. He can read any books and secret manuals there. Xianxia was stunned. Grandfather. This, Zhu Qing, who was at the side, spoke in a low voice. Grandfather, that's the God's Book Palace. It houses almost all of our pantheon's martial arts and secret techniques. This, the old man said softly, do as I say. Zhu Qing said, Grandfather, I don't understand. The old man glanced at Zhu Qing and said, since we can't be enemies, let's try to be friends. Chapter 797. God City. Yi Xian and Zhu Xie walked slowly on the streets. Zhu Xie glanced at Yi Xian. You're interested in our God City? Yi Xian nodded. A little. Zhu Xie smiled. Why? Yi Xian smiled. I just want to take a look. As he spoke, he looked around. This God City was small, but it exuded a sense of history. In this city, there were many people who were truly humans, and not gods or whatnot. Humans. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Xie. Are you guys humans or gods? This was what he had always wanted to ask. Zhu Xie smiled. We are humans. It's just that we were the strongest back then. Strictly speaking, our fight with Human King was also an internal struggle of the human race. It's just that we won. Human race. Yi Xian whispered. In other words, there are no gods in this world? There are only strong people? Zhu Xie shook his head. Oh. This world definitely has a god. A god in the truest sense of the word. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Xie. Zhu Xie smiled. Look at this universe. How do you think it was formed? Look at the myriad of living things. Where did these lives come from? Yi Xian smiled. The origin of life? Zhu Xie nodded. Actually, the ultimate goal of cultivators is to live forever. As for how to not die, this is a problem that nobody has solved yet. Perhaps someone in the fifth dimension has solved it. This is also why the fourth dimension's people want to go to the fifth dimension. Because the civilization there is higher than ours. Going there, we can learn many things. The most direct way is to improve our martial Dao. Fifth dimension. Yi Xian was silent. Actually, he didn't really want to go to the fifth dimension. Like what Lian Qian said, he didn't even understand the fourth dimension. What was the point of going to the fifth? Looking for trouble? Besides, he already had enemies in the fifth dimension. It could be said that he was the last person in the fourth dimension who wanted to go to the fifth dimension. After the two of them strolled around for a while, Zhu Xie brought Yi Xian to a huge hall. Around the hall, there were mysterious flying swords flying around. Yi Xian asked, This is? Zhu Xie said softly, The Godly Book City is the forbidden ground of our deity hall. Even I can only enter once a year. Furthermore, I have to complete many missions before I can enter. But now, with that said, she looked at Yi Xian. You can go in and look around as you please. There won't be any restrictions on you. Yi Xian asked, Why? Zhu Xie laughed. Aren't we working together? This is our reward for you. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, Then I won't hold back. Zhu Xie said seriously, You can look at it all you want, but you can't take it away, and you can't copy it. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. I'm not a greedy person. Zhu Xie nodded. Go in then. With that, she hesitated for a moment, and then she said, Go to the right corner of the last row. With that, she turned and left. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He looked at Zhu Xie's back view, and after a while, he walked towards the hall. Before he reached the hall, several spiritual senses scanned him. Yi Xian's expression turned serious. Because these spiritual senses were at least life realm experts. This deity hall was definitely stronger than he imagined. Without thinking much, Yi Xian walked in, and no one stopped him. After entering the hall, rows of bookshelves entered his eyes. The entire hall was filled with bookshelves, and on these bookshelves, there were all sorts of ancient books. Many. Yi Xian walked to a bookshelf, and he took out an ancient book. Very quickly, his face changed. This was a book of Fist Dao. Inside, it recorded a Fist Master's records of Fist Dao, and it was very detailed. As he read, Yi Xian was gradually engrossed. Because he had also cultivated Fist Dao before. Even now, his burial fist power was still very impressive. The physical body is the foundation of man, and the potential of the human body is limitless. Fist Dao is the way of man. As he read, Yi Xian became even more engrossed. This book of Fist Dao was not inferior to the sword manual that Honorable Sword gave him. This Fist Dao described various fist techniques, and many of the principles were very similar to his sword manual, but there were also differences. It could be said that fist and sword were the same, but their paths were different. As Yi Xian read, he realized that this Fist Dao was very, very suitable for him. Because this Fist Dao focused on the human as the core. More accurately, it focused on cultivating the physical body, and excavating the strength of one's own physical body, and not borrowing external objects or the power of heaven and earth. And Yi Xian's physical body was very strong. Perfection Realm Physical Body. Although it was the Perfection Realm Physical Body, he was not very proficient in the use of strength. After all, he was a swordsman, and not a Fist Dao cultivator. His previous research and learning were all about the sword. But at this moment, he was suddenly interested in the Fist Dao. Time passed bit by bit, and Yi Xian was engrossed in it. During this period of time, he was crazily researching this Fist Dao. After his research, he would leave the Grand Hall to practice for a while, and then return to continue his research. And during this period of time, no one came to disturb him. On the 7th day, Yi Xian just left the Grand Hall, and just as he was about to use Burial Fist, Wuxia appeared in front of him. She looked at Yi Xian. "I'll change a place for you to practice." During this period of time, Yi Xian came out every day to practice his Burial Fist. Although the surrounding experts secretly sealed the space for him to not let his strength leak, they realized that Yi Xian's fists were getting stronger and stronger. It was so strong that they were almost unable to control it. Therefore, they had no choice but to change Yi Xian to a place that specialized in cultivation. Soon, Wuxia brought Yi Xian to a cultivation field. Wuxia said, "There are many arrays and barriers here. You can do whatever you want." Yi Xian nodded and smiled. "All right, thank you, Miss Zhu." Wuxia hesitated and asked, "When are you going to finish?" Yi Xian had been inside for 7 days. And this guy didn't look like he was going to leave at all. "Finish?" Yi Xian was stunned. "What do you mean finish?" Wuxia's face fell. "How long do you plan on watching?" Yi Xian blinked. Then he took out the World Prison Pagoda and handed it to Wuxia. "Keep this, I want to continue watching. Take this pagoda as a reward for you." After that, he jumped to the side and continued practicing. Wuxia looked at the World Prison Pagoda in her hands and was stunned. What was going on? "He gave it to me? Is this a cabbage?" Wuxia looked at the World Prison Pagoda in her hands with a complicated expression. Her original goal in going to Black-Yellow Great World was for this pagoda, but she didn't expect it to be in her hands so easily. It was like a dream. After a while, Wuxia walked in front of Yi Xian and handed the World Prison Pagoda back to Yi Xian. "I'm returning it to you." Yi Xian didn't understand. "Miss Zhu, what are you doing?" Wuxia said solemnly, "If you want to continue watching inside, it's not impossible, but you have to show some sincerity. Otherwise, there will be many opposing voices here. After all, even if you are one of us, we don't get such treatment." Yi Xian said, "I'm returning the pagoda to you." Full of sincerity. Wuxia looked at Yi Xian. "Don't play these dirty tricks with me. Come out tomorrow, my grandfather and some experts from the God Ruins want to meet you. At that time, just reveal a little, understand?" Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. "All right." Wuxia nodded. "Continue cultivating." After that, she turned and left. At this time, Yixian suddenly laughed. Miss Zhu, is there anything you need? I can help you take a look. Zhu Xie shook her head. Take a look at what you need first. After that, she disappeared into the distance. After Zhu Xie left, Yixian continued to cultivate. He was cultivating to a point where he was going crazy. This fist scripture was equivalent to opening a door for him. Outside this door was a whole new world. Although he cultivated the fist Dao, he had always compared the fist Dao with the sword Dao. Both had their own advantages and could complement each other. Just like that, on the second day, Zhu Xie came to the cultivation field early in the morning. Looking at the distant fist Yixian, Zhu Xie was silent. Actually, disregarding the backing behind Yixian, he himself was very strong. Especially in terms of talent, it wasn't especially top-notch, but it wasn't bad either. Right now, Yixian's fist Dao already had the demeanor of a great master. 1 hour later, Yixian stopped. His right hand clenched tightly. At this moment, he felt like his body was like a volcano that had been accumulating energy for 10,000 years. Accumulating energy. This was what he learned from the fist manual. As for accumulating energy, it was also about technique. How to accumulate energy, how to release it after accumulating energy, all these were very important. And this accumulation of energy couldn't be done openly because the enemy wouldn't give you the chance. Therefore, the speed and release of energy had to be fast and undetectable. These 2 days, he had been studying this technique, because this technique could be applied to the sword Dao. Accumulating sword. However, he didn't use his sword yet because he wanted to master this accumulation technique first. After a moment, Yixian let go of his hand. The energy that he had accumulated in his body instantly receded like the tide. Yixian turned to look at Zhu Xie. Let's go. Zhu Xie nodded. Follow me. After that, she turned and left. Yixian followed. Along the way, Zhu Xie wanted to say something but hesitated. Yixian smiled. Is Miss Zhu worried about something? Zhu Xie nodded. Yes. Yixian smiled. Worried about what? Zhu Xie replied softly. Nothing. Yixian didn't ask anything else. Very quickly, Zhu Xie brought Yixian to a grand hall. In this grand hall, he once again saw the old man who fished the other day. Other than this old man, there was a tall middle-aged man and an old man in black robes. Seeing this middle-aged man, Yixian was stunned. Chapter 798. The middle-aged man in front of him was someone he had met once. It was the person who had threatened him in the black-yellow great world. Desolate God. He still remembered him. The desolate God glanced at Yixian and did not speak. At this time, the old man smiled and said, Let me formally introduce myself. I am Zhu Wei Tian, the current temple lord. Yixian nodded slightly. He opened his palm and the World Prison Pagoda appeared in his hand. The moment the World Prison Pagoda appeared, everyone's eyes turned to look at it. Yixian said, Senior asked me to come here because you want to know about this pagoda and the 5 dimensions, right? Zhu Wei Tian nodded. Yes. Yixian smiled and said, The name and origin of this pagoda are clear to everyone, so I will not introduce it too much. Let me tell you something Senior does not know. Zhu Wei Tian nodded. Please speak. Yixian said, This object has 9 layers. Each layer contains 9 kinds of Dao laws from the 5 dimensions. The desolate God suddenly said, Take a look. Yixian opened his palm and the great Dao law appeared in his hand. Soon, the energy contained in the surrounding earth began to move restlessly. Obviously, it felt the great Dao law. Zhu Wei Tian said softly, It really is the Dao law from the 5 dimensions. Yixian nodded and put away the great Dao law. At this time, the desolate God suddenly said, My temple wants this object. Yixian looked at the desolate God and said, Are you stupid? Hearing this, the atmosphere instantly became awkward. The desolate God narrowed his eyes and said, Say that again. Yixian grinned. I asked if you are stupid. The desolate God waved his right hand and a powerful force suddenly swept towards Yixian. At this time, The immortal slaying sword gourd suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's hand. The next moment, a sword light tore through the space. Rumble! A powerful aura suddenly shook the hall, but it disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Wei. Zhu Wei had made his move. The origami coldly looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you seem to think too highly of yourself. Yi Xian shrugged. Looks like we can't work together anymore. Since that's the case, I'll take my leave. With that, he turned around and left. The desolate god sneered, You want to leave? Right at this moment, Zhu Weitian glanced coldly at the origami. The latter hesitated for a moment, but didn't say anything in the end. However, her gaze grew even colder. At this time, Yi Xian had already walked out of the main hall, but in the next moment, he returned to the main hall without any warning. Yi Xian looked at Zhu Weitian. It was him again. Zhu Weitian smiled and said, Something unpleasant happened. I hope you don't mind. Yi Xian smiled and said, I mind very much. Zhu Weitian looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian said, 2 things. First, make him apologize. Second, make him leave. Hearing this, the desolate god's eyes flashed with killing intent. Zhu Weitian said softly, Are you serious? Yi Xian smiled and said, Very serious. Zhu Weitian smiled and said, Actually, I'm very curious about what you're relying on. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, Senior, I'm a little disappointed. Lady Zhu told me that the temple wants to work with me, so I came here. I came here with a sincere heart. But now, I suddenly realize that you don't seem to be sincere in working with me. With that, he looked at the desolate god and said, You asked me for the 5-dimensional Dao law. I really want to ask, what are you relying on? Of course, if you say it's based on strength, then I have nothing to say. We can continue fighting. What's the point of talking about working together? The desolate god was expressionless. What are you going to use? Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Have you forgotten how the god of the temple died? With that, he waved his right hand and 4 swords suddenly appeared in front of him. The swords of the plain-dressed woman, Shao Qi, the executing heaven sword, and the black sword. These 4 swords, after Qing'er left, had been separated again. However, he didn't use the other 3 swords. Seeing these 4 swords, Huang Shi's expression became serious. How did the god of the temple die? The temple knew very well. He was killed by that woman in an instant. Killed in an instant. How big was the gap between them to be able to kill in an instant? Apart from that mysterious woman, there was also a plain-dressed woman. Yi Xian didn't waste any words. He immediately started to force the 4 swords together. Seeing this, the desolate god's expression changed. This Yi Xian said he was going to fight. Zhu Weitian also frowned. He didn't expect Yi Xian to start fighting without a word. Not far away, Zhu Xiera suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She grabbed Yi Xian's arm and shook her head. Not to this extent. Yi Xian said coldly, Miss Zhu, look at this. Is the temple trying to negotiate with me? This isn't a negotiation at all. This is robbery. I can't stand this. Let's fight. Be more direct. With that, he put the executing heaven sword and Shao Qi's sword together. A sword's cry suddenly rang through the sky. A strong sword will rippled out from the newly merged swords. Seeing this, the desolate god and the rest's expression changed. Yi Xian was also slightly stunned. He didn't expect these 2 swords to be able to be combined. Other than the time when he combined 4 swords into one, he had never combined 4 swords. This time, he didn't expect these 2 swords to be able to be combined. Yi Xian quickly grabbed the hard sword. The moment it touched his hand, a strong sword will surged into his body. Boom! Yi Xian's body shook violently. The next moment, 2 sword wills emitted from his body. Good and evil sword will. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Power! At this moment, he felt another power other than the executing heaven sword. This power should be from Shao Qi's sword. He had never felt it before. What kind of power was this? Yi Xian was puzzled. At this moment, Zhu Xie hurriedly said, Yi Xian, things really haven't reached that stage. Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He looked at Zhu Xie. Miss Zhu, where do you think things have reached? Zhu Xie was silent for a moment before turning to Zhu Weitian. What does grandfather want? Zhu Weitian looked at Yi Xian. He just wants to understand the 5 dimensions. Understand the 5 dimensions. Zhu Xie looked at Zhu Weitian. Can I talk to him? Zhu Weitian was silent for a moment before nodding. All right. Zhu Xie looked at Desolate God. You better not interfere. Desolate God's face was a little ugly. Zhu Weitian suddenly said, he won't interfere. Zhu Xie nodded. She turned to Yi Xian. Let's go. After that, she brought Yi Xian out of the hall. At this moment, Yi Xian didn't continue. He was a little excited. The 2 swords were actually fused by him just like that. Moreover, he realized that Shao Qi's sword contained a strong power. What an unexpected surprise. After the 2 of them left, Desolate God said solemnly, Are we going to let him be so arrogant? Zhu Weitian said calmly, Start a war with him? Desolate God shook her head. Why should the temple fear him? Zhu Weitian was expressionless. It isn't that we fear him. It isn't worth it. That 5th-dimensional treasure is not something that my deity's Templar can possess. Desolate God sighed. Just because it possesses the karma of the 5 dimensions? We are all cultivators and have many karma with us. If we are afraid of this and that, then what is the point of cultivating? After that he turned and left. Zhu Weitian shook his head and didn't say anything. The black-robed old man beside Zhu Weitian said softly, He is very ambitious. Zhu Weitian said flatly, I hope he doesn't do anything stupid. The black-robed old man hesitated. Is it really impossible to keep that treasure forever? Zhu Weitian smiled. But even you don't believe me? The black-robed old man shook his head. Of course not. I am just unwilling. Zhu Weitian said softly, How can I be willing? However, if the temple takes it by force, then we have to accept all the karma of it. We can't. The black-robed old man said, Can Yi Xian handle it? Zhu Weitian shook his head. He can't handle it. However, from the looks of it, someone is blocking the karma for him. It should be the 2 people behind him. He shook his head again. After we know what we want to know, let him leave quickly. I have a bad feeling about him staying here. This feeling is getting stronger and stronger. The black-robed old man was shocked. Bad feeling? Zhu Weitian nodded. This feeling is getting stronger and stronger. Something bad is about to happen. The black-robed old man said, Then let him leave as soon as possible. Zhu Weitian nodded. There was still a trace of worry in his eyes. At his level, to have such a feeling meant that something bad was about to happen. However, he didn't know what it was. But he knew that it was definitely related to Yi Xian. Zhu Xie brought Yi Xian to a riverside. The 2 of them walked while Yi Xian held the sword in his hand. The sword formed by Shao Qi and the executing heaven sword. Suddenly, Zhu Xie said, You are too hot-tempered. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Zhu Xie. He smiled. Actually, what the Desolate God said must have been approved by your grandfather. Zhu Xie was silent. Yi Xian said again, If I compromise, the divine palace will be insatiable. You will slaughter me like a pig, won't you? Zhu Xie looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. You seem to be able to see everything clearly. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Zhu, just ask me what you want to know. I don't want to work with the temple, but I am willing to work with you. After you ask, I will go to your Godbook hall. Zhu Xie, seeing that Zhu Xie didn't speak, Yi Xian said, Ask. I will tell you everything I know. Zhu Xie was silent for a while before saying, Tell me honestly. Has this pagoda recognized you as its owner? Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, a voice rang in Yi Xian's head. You might be in trouble. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. Trouble? P.S. 4 minutes late, sorry. Chapter 799. The voice of the 8th floor. Yi Xian asked in his heart, "What does senior mean?" The 8th floor did not reply. Yi Xian's face darkened as he asked again, "Senior, what is going on?" The 8th floor still did not reply. Yi Xian suddenly had a bad feeling. Zhu Xier suddenly asked, "What is it?" Yi Xian shook his head, "Nothing, Miss Zhu, just ask what you want to know." Zhu Xier looked at Yi Xian and started asking. Zhu Xier asked about the 5th dimension, and Yi Xian did not hide anything. This was because he himself did not know much about the 5th dimension. Of course, he knew more than others. About 4 hours later, Zhu Xier turned and left. Yi Xian immediately returned to the Godbook Hall. This time, he did not study the 5th Tao but started to read all the ancient books in the Godbook City. He wanted to memorize all of them, because they were too useful. The ancient books in the Godbook Hall were not only about martial arts but also about culture. For example, the origin of the black-yellow great world, some secret realms of the 4th dimension, and some legends of people. In short, it was all-encompassing and had everything. And they were all very precious and valuable things. As he read, Yi Xian was even more shocked. At this moment, he realized that this Godbook Hall was a little scary as it had preserved its history and culture very well. In the following time, Yi Xian started to record the ancient books in the Godbook Hall. Although he could not take it away, he could record it down. And these things would be of great help to him in the future. On the other side, in a large hall, Zhu Xier was talking to Zhu Weitian, and about 4 hours later, Zhu Weitian asked softly, "Is he hiding anything?" Zhu Xier replied solemnly, "I don't know, but we have gotten what we wanted. Isn't that right?" Zhu Weitian walked to the front of the hall and looked at the horizon with a blank look in his eyes. The 5th dimension is higher than the 4th dimension. Although I already knew, it is still hard to accept it from him. The martial arts civilization of the 5th dimension far surpassed that of the 4th dimension. What did this mean? This meant that once the barrier to the 5th dimension was forcefully opened, the 4th dimension would most likely be enslaved and oppressed by others. This world was cruel. Searching for the 5th dimension was the same as the weak looking for the strong. Would there be any good results from this? Of course, for those who stood at the peak of the 4th dimension, it was definitely beneficial. This was because when they reached the 5th dimension, they would not be too weak. On the contrary, they could use the more advanced martial arts civilization in the 5th dimension to break through. But what about the people in the 4-dimensional universe? At this moment, Zhu Weitian said softly, "I suddenly have a feeling that someone deliberately used a special method to seal the path from the 4th dimension to the 5th dimension. The other party did this to protect the 4th dimension. Protect the 4-dimensional universe?" Zhu Xier looked at Zhu Weitian. "What do you mean?" Zhu Weitian shook his head. "It's just an intuition." Zhu Xier said solemnly, "But doing so is equivalent to sealing off one of our paths to this world." Zhu Weitian laughed. "It's better than the destruction of the 4-dimensional universe, isn't it?" Zhu Xier was silent. If the 4th dimension and the 5th dimension connected, what would the result be? Would the 5th dimension accept the 4th dimension and help the 4th dimension? Green City, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment onwards, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man stood a youth. The youth had a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this moment, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old. Her 2 small hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pale color and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. Her name was Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall, asking timidly, "Great elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the crown prince." Why did you remove him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. How dare you? The great elder suddenly shouted angrily, It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether to remove him or not. Someone, drag her away. At this moment, the new crown prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder said coldly, Then flog him 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang will inherit the position of crown prince. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. The crisp sound of the slap was heard. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the crown prince. I will risk my life for you. Yi Lang nodded slightly. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooey! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no morals. From now on, Yi Xian's position will be removed, and Yi Lang will take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was about to be removed, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the hall, and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you remove him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting?" Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from the position. This is really unfair." "Impudent!" The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's removed or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this moment, the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder said coldly, "Then flog 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang, and he knew it was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" With that, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up, but she did not cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the Crown Prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the Crown Prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and he quickly bowed deeply. "I'll go through fire and water for the Crown Prince, and I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall, so don't show any mercy. Do you understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately, he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was torn, and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man." "How dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu. As he walked up to Yi Ling, seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Chapter 800. Wuxia's expression changed drastically when he heard this voice. Something's wrong. Wuxia ignored Yi Xian and flew up into the sky. At this moment, countless experts from temple were rushing over swiftly. Beside Wuxia, Zhu Wei Tian's expression was extremely solemn. He stared into the distance where there was a pitch-black spatial black hole 1,000 feet away. In front of the black hole stood 4 men in black with spears in their hands. These 4 men were like phantoms, and their bodies could not be seen clearly. Wuxia asked solemnly, "Who are they?" Zhu Wei shook his head. "I don't know." Wuxia's expression changed drastically. "I don't know. This is a serious matter. A power that even Temple doesn't know about." At this moment, she understood why her grandfather was so solemn. After all, Temple wasn't weak even against the dual world sky and the life forbidden zone. Temple had the ability to do so. In the entire 4-dimensional universe, only the dual realm sky and the life forbidden zone could make the divine Temple feel apprehensive. However, these people didn't come from either of those places. So here's the problem. Where exactly are they from? What power are they from? Right at this moment, a middle-aged man walked out from the black hole in the distance. He wore a dark golden robe, had long hair that hung loosely on his shoulders, and there was a dark red mark between his brows. Strands of black gas emanated from his body, and they slithered around him like snakes. After the middle-aged man walked out from the black hole, his gaze descended onto Zhu Wei. "Yi Xian. Yi Xian. He's here for Yi Xian." Wuxia's face fell. Now she knew why that fellow Yi Xian had come back. He saw that the situation wasn't good. Zhu Wei looked at the middle-aged man. "You are." The middle-aged man stared at Zhu Wei and said, "Yi Xian." "Yi Xian." Zhu Wei fell silent for a moment before he said, "Who are you?" Meanwhile, the middle-aged man suddenly appeared before Zhu Wei, and he just stared at him. "Hand it over." Zhu Wei suddenly waved his right hand. Bang! A powerful force surged out from his sleeve. However, before this force could approach the middle-aged man, it vanished without a trace. Seeing this, Zhu Wei Tian's expression changed. His opponent's strength was above him, or rather, far above him. The middle-aged man looked down. "Let him come out. Otherwise, the temple will be destroyed." The Temple of Light had been destroyed. Zhu Wei Tian's face darkened. Destroy the temple? It had to be said that the other party was quite arrogant. However, he still didn't make a move because the temple wouldn't make such a powerful enemy just for Yi Xian. Zhu Wei Tian turned around and looked down. At that moment, Yi Xian was already hiding in the scripture hall. Zhu Wei Tian remained silent for a moment, and he was about to speak. However, the door to the divine library suddenly opened, and Yi Xian walked out. Yi Xian looked at the sky and smiled. "Senior Zhu, don't worry. I won't stay here and refuse to leave." As he spoke, he looked at the middle-aged man. "How should I address you?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. "Zijing." Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "What force do you belong to?" The middle-aged man said, "No comment." Yi Xian opened his palm, and the pagoda appeared in his hand. "Do you want this pagoda?" The middle-aged man shook his head. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. "You don't want this pagoda?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. "I want the pagoda, and I want the person too." Yi Xian's face darkened. Not only did they want his wealth, but they also wanted his life. Yi Xian suddenly attacked. Buzz! The sound of a sword howling shot up into the sky. In the air, the middle-aged man opened his palm and pressed it down lightly. Rumble. The entire sky trembled as if it was about to explode. As for Yi Xian's sword, it was forcefully suppressed in the air, unable to move an inch forward. However, at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot, and his sword pierced through the powerful force. Immeasurable sword. It disregarded everything. In the blink of an eye, the sword arrived in front of Zhijing. The latter frowned and punched out. Rumble. The sword light instantly shattered, but Zhijing himself was pushed back dozens of feet. Not only that, but there was a deep sword mark on his fist. As for Yi Xian, he had vanished without a trace. Zhijing glanced at his fist and frowned. There was a trace of disbelief in his eyes. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian would be able to injure him. Moments later, Zhijing scanned the surroundings. There was no sign of Yi Xian's aura. After a moment of silence, Zhijing opened his right hand, and a golden eye suddenly shot up into the sky. In the next moment, the golden eye suddenly erupted with a golden light that instantly enveloped the entire ruins of God. However, he still couldn't find Yi Xian. Zhijing's brows instantly furrowed. That was it? That was completely impossible. Zhu Weitian's eyes were also filled with astonishment because he also couldn't find Yi Xian. It was as if Yi Xian had evaporated from the face of the earth. Zhijing was silent for a moment, then looked at Zhu Weitian. Is that item in the hands of your temple, or is it in his hands? Zhu Weitian said solemnly, It's in his hands. Zhijing nodded, then turned and left. The four people behind him suddenly disappeared mysteriously. Watching Zhijing and the others leave, Zhu Weitian's expression became extremely solemn. What kind of power is this? My temple actually knows nothing about them. Zhu Xie's expression was also extremely solemn. Now that the temple had a basic understanding of the major powers in the four-dimensional universe, the temple actually knew nothing about this sudden appearance of Zhijing and the others. In this four-dimensional universe, there was a power even more mysterious than the dual-world skies and the life-forbidden zone. At this moment, Zhu Weitian suddenly said, Pass down my orders, no one is to find trouble with that Yi Xian, and no one is to interfere in his affairs. At this moment, he realized that the waters of Yi Xian were getting murkier and murkier. Zhu Xie nodded, understood. Only now did she understand why Zhu Weitian did not dare to take the pagoda. This pagoda, whoever took it would be unlucky, because there were simply too many people who coveted this pagoda. Zhu Xie raised his head to look at the starry sky far away. I wonder if this guy can make it through. Far away in the starry sky, Yi Xian walked slowly. At this moment, he was in a state of emptiness, and no one could see him. Yi Xian's face was a little gloomy. After the temple's crisis was resolved, this Zhijing appeared. F***CK, this is endless. Can't you just let me rest for a while? If this goes on, who can take it? Yi Xian sat down cross-legged, looking at the sword in his hand. This was a combination of two swords, and just now, he had used this sword to injure that Zhijing. And would the other party let it go? Definitely not. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian's face became even more gloomy. There was really no end to this. Right at this moment, the space before him suddenly trembled, and it didn't take long for Zhu Xie's voice to resound. They've gone to Black Origin World. Yi Xian's pupils constricted when he heard this, and then he vanished on the spot. Black Origin World. On this day, 5 people suddenly appeared in the sky above the northern territory of Black Origin World. These 5 people were Zhijing and the others. In midair, Xiao Tian gazed at Zhijing and the others with an extremely solemn expression. Zhijing glanced at Xiao Tian and said, Ask him to come out. Yi Xian. Xiao Tian said, He isn't in the north. Zhijing nodded slightly. He will come out. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly opened his right hand and pressed it down lightly. Bang! A powerful force suddenly swept down from midair, and then the space in the surroundings instantly started to crack apart inch by inch. Xiao Tian's eyes instantly narrowed when she witnessed this scene, and then she vanished on the spot. Bang! A powerful force tore through the surroundings and shot straight at Zhijing. Zhijing glanced at Xiao Tian. In the next moment, a strand of black energy suddenly flew out from around him, and then a ferocious face suddenly smiled ferociously from within the black energy. At the same time, a strange and ferocious laughter resounded. Rumble! An explosion suddenly resounded in midair, and then a figure retreated repeatedly. It was Xiao Tian. After retreating for over 3 kilometers, Xiao Tian suddenly stopped moving, and a wisp of blood slowly seeped out from the corner of her mouth. Xiao Tian stared coldly at Jijing. "You're a world-shocking expert at any rate, yet you don't even have the pride of an expert?" Jijing shook his head. "One who achieves great things doesn't bother about trifles." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly opened his right hand and pressed it down once more. Sky River City started to collapse inch by inch, and then countless shrill cries resounded throughout the city. Xiao Tian's expression changed drastically, and she was just about to attack again when a ray of white light suddenly shot into the sky from below. In the next moment, a spear pierced through the heavens and the earth and shot straight towards Jijing. Jijing's eyes narrowed slightly as he pressed the fingers of his right hand together. Bang! The spear was forcefully stopped on the spot, and it was a white-clothed woman who stood behind the spear. Xianxia suddenly grabbed the spear with her right hand, and then she stabbed it forward. The sound of something tearing resounded. At the same time, a ray of spear light smashed straight towards Jijing. Jijing's face remained emotionless as he waved his right hand. Bang! The ray of spear light instantly shattered. However, a spear suddenly arrived before the center of his forehead, but it stopped half an inch away from his forehead. Because the spear had been clamped between 2 fingers. Jijing's fingers shook lightly, and then Xianxia was instantly blasted 3 kilometers away along with her spear. Jijing was just about to attack again when a ray of light suddenly tore through the sky towards him. The boundless sword. It was Yixian. Jijing's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it forward. Bang! The ray of light shattered, and then Yixian instantly retreated 3 kilometers away. This time, Yixian hadn't chosen to conceal himself. Jijing gazed at Yixian and was just about to attack when a man suddenly appeared behind him. Emoxie. At this moment, a powerful force was trembling around Emoxie's body. Jijing glanced at Yixian's group of 3. "Shall we attack together?" Emoxie gazed at Yixian. Yixian was just about to attack when the howl of a sword suddenly resounded from below, and it didn't take long for a woman to walk out from a room. The person who walked out was Xiaoqi. Sword light coiled around Xiaoqi's body like a bolt of lightning, and it was extremely shocking. Xiaoqi gazed at Yixian. "You're not alone. P.S. I can smell the monthly tickets." Chapter 801. At this moment, everyone in Tianjiang City was looking at Jijing in the sky. Just how strong was this person before them? No one knew. Even Xiao Tian couldn't see through Jijing's true strength. She couldn't sense it. This Jijing gave her the feeling of a vast starry sky, unfathomable. To be able to make her feel unfathomable. Just how terrifying was he? Xiao Tian's expression was unprecedentedly serious. And Yixian didn't know Jijing's true strength either. Life realm? Or life destruction? According to his guess, Jijing was at least life destruction. He might even be an expert above that. Could he beat him? He definitely couldn't, but he had to fight. Yixian looked at Xianxia and Emoxie. He was about to speak when Emoxie chuckled. "Brother Yi, the North is everyone's big family. You can't support it alone. Let me be the vanguard." With that, he slowly closed his eyes. A powerful force began to gather around him. In the next moment, he suddenly opened his eyes. 2 dark yellow pillars of light shot out from his eyes. Wherever the 2 pillars of light passed, space began to be annihilated inch by inch. Jijing frowned. Special ability. With that, a wisp of black gas suddenly flew out from beside him. Boom! The 2 dark yellow pillars of light instantly shattered. At the same time, the wisp of black gas arrived in front of Emoxie. Emoxie suddenly roared. "Ancestor descends." Boom! A powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. Rumble. The wisp of black gas was blasted back in front of Zhijing. Everyone looked at Xianxia. At this moment, there was a huge phantom of an old man behind Xianxia. The old man's expression was indifferent, and his body exuded a monstrous pressure. Zhijing coldly glanced at the phantom of the old man. Ancestor descends. An ancient secret technique. Interesting. With that, he suddenly pointed at the air with his fingers. A wisp of black gas suddenly flew out from his shoulder. In the distance, Xianxia suddenly brought his hands together. In the blink of an eye, his hands suddenly shook outwards. Boom! An invisible force shook out. In an instant, the space in front of him collapsed inch by inch. At this moment, the wisp of black gas arrived. Rumble! A deafening explosion suddenly resounded in the sky above the north. In the sky, Xia rapidly retreated. This time, the old man behind him became even more illusory. However, the black gas still existed. It was like a bolt of lightning that shot straight at Xia. However, at this moment, a sword light suddenly slashed the black gas. Bang! The wisp of black gas was instantly stopped on the spot by the sword light. The wisp of black gas was struck by the sword light. In front of Xia, Yixian said, "How do you feel?" Xia wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and smiled, "I can still fight." Yixian nodded. "None of us can defeat this guy." As he spoke, he looked at Zhijing. "I, Yixian, am not someone who likes to bully others. You have two choices. First, you lower your level to the same level as me, and we will fight one-on-one. Second, you bully the weak, and we will gang up on you." Zhijing looked at Yixian. "You want to fight one-on-one?" Zhijing looked at Yixian. "You want to fight?" Zhijing nodded slightly. "I'll fulfill your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, his aura plummeted. It didn't take long for his cultivation base to drop to the unknown realm. With that, his aura suddenly dropped. Soon, his realm dropped to the unknown realm. Next to Yixian, Xia said in a deep voice, "Watch out." Although the other party had lowered his cultivation, everyone knew that his battle awareness and the usage of some martial techniques would not be reduced in the slightest. The opponent still had a huge advantage. The opponent still had a great advantage. Naturally, Yixian also understood this. He looked at Zhijing and was about to speak when Zhijing suddenly said, "Do you know why I dropped my realm?" At this moment, Yixian suddenly disappeared. Boundless sword. Seeing Yixian suddenly attack, Zhijing narrowed his eyes. He suddenly put his hands together. This time, two wisps of black gas suddenly gathered together, directly clamping Yixian's sword light. However, two of his fingers immediately cracked. At this time, Yixian suddenly spun the executing heaven sword in his hand. Zhijing's expression changed. His right hand gripped the executing heaven sword, and his left hand punched at Yixian's face. The moment Zhijing punched, Yixian's left hand punched back. Boom! The two collided and separated, but the moment they separated, several sword lights slashed straight at Zhijing. Zhijing waved his right hand, directly blocking all the sword lights. However, at this time, Yixian suddenly appeared in front of him, and the next moment, a sword was already at his forehead. Fast. Yixian's sword was not fast, but his timing was very good. Zhijing frowned slightly. This Yixian's attainments in the way of the sword were a little beyond his expectations. Without thinking too much about it, he suddenly tilted his head and dodged Yixian's sword by a hair. At the same time, his right hand clenched into a fist, and then he suddenly smashed a hook at Yixian. But at practically the same time, Yixian's sword suddenly slashed horizontally, and it slashed straight at Zhijing's throat. Zhijing's punch was able to hit Yixian, but the price he had to pay was to take Yixian's sword head-on. Moreover, neither of them dodged. Bang! In an instant, both of them retreated explosively. Zhijing only stopped after retreating an entire 300 m. At practically the same time, Yixian stopped as well. At this moment, Yixian's face wasn't very good, and it was slightly red and swollen. Moreover, Zhijing had paid the price as well. There was a sword mark on his throat. He was bleeding. But it wasn't fatal. Ji Jing's body was extremely strong. Ji Jing looked at Yi Xian. I underestimated you a little. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward. As soon as he did, his entire body instantly became illusory. An image of a fist suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Bang! The space around Yi Xian instantly exploded apart. Moreover, his body had even cracked apart at this moment. Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Bang! The image of a fist was instantly stopped on the spot by this strike, but it didn't shatter. Meanwhile, an afterimage suddenly flashed by in front of him. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly, and he raised his sword to block it. Bang! Yi Xian was instantly blasted over 1 kilometer away, and he hadn't even stopped moving when an afterimage tore through the surroundings. Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from afar. In the next moment, Ji Jing instantly retreated explosively by 3 kilometers. Moreover, one of his ears had vanished, and blood was flowing from it. Ji Jing stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Besides that sword, there was a bottle gourd in Yi Xian's hand. The Immortal Annihilation Sword Gourd. Just now, he'd been blasted back by the combination of Yi Xian's Immortal Annihilation Sword and the Executing Heaven Sword. There was a trace of a solemn expression in Ji Jing's eyes. If he hadn't reacted extremely quickly just now, then he wouldn't have just lost his ear, it would have been his entire body. Ji Jing slowly clenched his right fist. In an instant, a strand of formidable energy converged in his fist. At the same time, numerous strands of black energy suddenly appeared around him. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and then the Executing Heaven Sword flew directly into the Immortal Annihilation Sword Gourd. A sword howl resounded from within the Immortal Annihilation Sword. At this moment, the Executing Heaven Sword was a combination of 2 swords. So, when the Immortal Annihilation Sword Gourd was added to it, its might could be said to have risen to another level. Right at this moment, Ji Jing suddenly vanished on the spot. In an instant, countless strands of black energy surged down like a storm towards Yi Xian. This. Numerous tearing sounds resounded like firecrackers, and it was extremely shocking. The expressions of Xianxia and the others changed when they witnessed this scene. Even though Yi Xian was strong, Ji Jing was even more terrifying. Yi Xian took a deep breath, and then he suddenly roared furiously, slash. As soon as his voice resounded, a sword howl suddenly resounded, and then a ray of light shot out from Yi Xian's Immortal Annihilation Sword Gourd. The ray of light tore through the sky and tore everything in its path apart. This attack seemed as if it intended to slash the heavens and the earth into pieces, and it was extremely terrifying. The spectators watched as Yi Xian's attack was instantly drowned by countless strands of black energy. There was no movement. There was actually no movement from this attack that shook the heavens and the earth. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. At this moment, Yi Xian was stunned as well. What's going on? Because he's actually unable to sense the existence of the Executing Heaven Sword. Right at this moment, the strands of black energy suddenly started trembling, and then an afterimage suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't even have the time to react before a sword stabbed into his stomach where his heart was. At the same time, a voice suddenly resounded by his ears. I am a swordsman. My sword is swifter than yours. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 802. It was a swordsman. At this moment, everyone here was stunned. No one had expected that Ji Jing would actually be a swordsman. Moreover, his sword was actually so swift. In front of Yi Xian, Ji Jing looked at him coldly. Are you surprised? Yi Xian grinned. I'm a little surprised. And a pleasant surprise. Ji Jing frowned slightly when he heard this, and then his expression changed drastically. He was about to retreat when Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword. Everyone watched as one of Ji Jing's arms flew into the air. Ji Jing stared fixedly at Yi Xian from over 1 kilometer away. How could this be possible? Everyone was looking at Yi Xian because a sword was still sticking out of Yi Xian's stomach. However, Yi Xian was completely unharmed. Moreover, Yi Xian's body was actually absorbing the sword at a maddening rate. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to completely absorb the sword. Yi Xian's face was covered in an intoxicated expression, and he grinned as he gazed at Ji Jing. This sword isn't bad. It's a great tonic. As soon as he finished speaking, the immortal Slayer's sword gourd in his hand suddenly trembled violently, and then a ray of light suddenly tore through the air. Ji Jing's eyes narrowed slightly when he witnessed this scene, and then he suddenly pressed the fingers of his left hand together and tapped forward lightly. After that, he spun it, and then a strand of black energy suddenly transformed into a black sword that shot forward. It didn't take long for the black sword to slash down on Yi Xian's execution heaven sword. Bang! In an instant, the black sword exploded apart. However, the execution heaven sword didn't slow down at all as it continued shooting towards Ji Jing. Everywhere it passed, space was torn apart inch by inch, and it was an extremely shocking sight. Suddenly, Ji Jing formed a sword seal with his left hand, and then he muttered, 10,000 swords converge. A sword howl resounded through the sky, and then countless ghastly blue swords of energy suddenly appeared in front of Ji Jing. Ji Jing pressed his fingers together and pointed forward, "Go!" Chi 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 chi. Countless energy swords shot out, and when they were about 10 zhang away from Yi Xian's executing heaven sword, these energy swords suddenly trembled violently, and then the 10,000 swords merged into one. The moment they fused together, a powerful force instantly shattered the surrounding space. Rumble! Under everyone's gaze, a powerful wave of sword chi suddenly erupted between the two swords. Boom boom boom. The entire sky began to be destroyed inch by inch. Below them, countless northern region experts hurriedly joined forces to resist this power. If the shock waves of this power were to reach the northern region, the entire northern region would be destroyed. In the sky, the battle between Yi Xian and Ji Jing was not over yet. Yi Xian opened his palm and the executing heaven sword returned to his hand. Countless sword chi raged around him, but they were all blocked by the good and evil sword essence from his body. In the distance, the black aura around Ji Jing was also completely blocked by the black aura around him. The two of them looked at each other from afar. Suddenly, Yi Xian moved. A ray of sword light tore through the battlefield. Immeasurable sword. In the distance, Ji Jing narrowed his eyes. He suddenly clenched his left hand, and the black aura around him instantly condensed into a black sword. In the blink of an eye, this black sword suddenly flew out, but the moment it flew out, a sword directly pierced its tip. Boom! The black sword shook violently, and then cracked. At the same time, Ji Jing instantly retreated hundreds of zhang away, and the moment he stopped, the black sword in his hand directly exploded. At this moment, not far away, Yi Xian suddenly pointed his sword at Ji Jing from afar. Soul-suppressing sword. Ji Jing's body trembled violently, and at this moment, his expression changed greatly. He suddenly slammed his left hand down. Boom! A powerful force suddenly shook in front of him, and he himself had already retreated hundreds of zhang away. But before he could stop, another ray of sword light appeared in front of him. Immeasurable sword. This sword was another immeasurable sword. Ji Jing's pupils suddenly shrank, boom. A powerful aura suddenly swept out from Ji Jing's body, and this aura directly shattered Yi Xian's ray of sword light. Not only that, but the executing heaven sword was also blasted away. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the executing heaven sword flew back into his hand. Yi Xian looked at Ji Jing expressionlessly. At this moment, Ji Jing had already recovered his realm. Below, everyone's expression darkened. And Lanxiu stared at Ji Jing, and her right hand tightly gripped the spear in her hand. Xia also slowly clenched his fists. The calmest one was Shao Qi. From beginning to end, Shao Qi's expression was very calm. After recovering his realm, Ji Jing's right hand instantly grew back. Experts at their level were very difficult to kill. Ji Jing looked at Yi Xian. "You have an extraordinary amount of treasures." Yi Xian smiled. "Then we won't use any equipment, and we won't use any profound energy. How about it?" A competition of fundamentals. Ji Jing shook his head. I have no interest in continuing to waste time with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm. Countless wisps of black gas suddenly flew out of his palm. The wisps of black gas turned into beams of sword radiance as soon as they flew out. Countless sword radiances shot towards Yi Xian. At this moment, these black swords were countless times stronger than before. Because Ji Jing had recovered his realm. In the distance, Yi Xian watched the countless rays of sword light engulf him with a calm expression. At this moment, Shao Qi and Lanxiu and Mo Xie suddenly appeared by his side. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth lifted slightly. Attack! As soon as he finished speaking, the executing heaven sword suddenly flew out from his immortal slaying sword gourd. Buzz! A sword hum suddenly resounded, and then a ray of sword light tore through the air. On the other hand, Shao Qi, who stood by Yi Xian's side, suddenly opened her palms, and then 2 rays of sword light condensed within them. In an instant, the 2 rays of sword light flew out, and everywhere they passed, they tore through everything. And Lanxiu suddenly tossed her spear towards the distance. The spear carried an extremely powerful force as it tore through the air, and everywhere it passed, space was torn apart and obliterated. It was an extremely shocking sight. Mo Xie didn't stand by idly either. At the instant that Yi Xian attacked, the old man behind him suddenly transformed into a ray of black light that flew out, and the black light carried an explosive force that could destroy the world. At this moment, Yi Xian's group of 4 didn't hold back at all. They didn't dare to hold back at all. Because the person they were facing might be an expert at the life-destruction realm. None of them dared to be careless at all. In the sky above Tianjiang City. Rumble! A shocking explosion suddenly resounded. In an instant, the entire sky above Tianjiang City turned pitch black. In that pitch-black space, countless powerful forces wreaked havoc, and one explosion after another rang out continuously. Within the city, countless people looked up at the sky. Would they win? In that pitch-black space, Yi Xian's group of 4 had already begun attacking Ji Jing in a frenzy. However, Ji Jing wasn't at a disadvantage even though he was fighting 1 against 4. On the other side, the 4 men in black still didn't make a move. However, Qiao Tian and Guanjun were constantly on guard against these 4 people. As soon as these 4 people made a move, they would immediately attack. At this moment, not far away, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Immeasurable sword. Once again, Yi Xian unleashed the infinite sword. In the instant that he unleashed the infinite sword, Yi Jing, who was not far away, had a drastic change in his expression. His left hand suddenly reached out in front of him, and this grasp directly grabbed a sword. Executing Heaven Sword. The moment he grabbed the executing Heaven Sword, Shao Qi suddenly appeared behind him, and in the next moment, a sword light slashed towards the back of his head. This sword was even faster than Yi Xian's sword. Almost at the same time, a long spear suddenly pierced through the air, aiming for Ji Jing's head. At this moment, Ji Jing's expression instantly turned ferocious, and he suddenly roared, "Out!" As soon as his voice fell, a black sword suddenly flew out of his body. Boom! A black sword light vibrated out of the black sword, and in an instant, Yi Xian's group of 3 were directly pushed back. This time, the 3 of them were pushed back thousands of feet. In the distance, Yi Xian looked at Ji Jing. In front of Ji Jing, a long sword floated, and an illusory black dragon circled around the sword. The black dragon's expression was ferocious, and it was glaring at Yi Xian angrily. Ji Jing slowly closed his eyes. "You guys have successfully angered me." At this moment, he suddenly realized that he had underestimated Yi Xian's group of 4. These 4 people really had the ability to kill him if they joined forces. Even though it sounded slightly unbelievable because his cultivation far surpassed Yi Xian's group of 4, it was a fact. Ji Jing opened his palm, and then the black sword suddenly started spinning swiftly while numerous sword howls shook the surroundings. The expressions of Yi Xian's group of 4 turned solemn when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and the executing heaven sword flew back into the sword gourd. In the next moment, Countless strands of sword intent seeped out from his body and surged into the sword gourd. And Lanxiao clenched the spear in her hand tightly, and the spear in her hand started to tremble. At the side, Xiaoqi's expression was calm, and a strand of sword light appeared on the tip of her right finger. Mo slowly clenched his fists tightly, and a formidable force was gathering within his body as well. All four of them were prepared to fight with their lives on the line. In the distance, Ji Jing looked at Yi Xian. "I'll kill you with a single strike." As soon as he finished speaking, the black sword in his hand suddenly flew out. The sword tore through the sky. This strike seemed like it intended to destroy the entire heaven-earth great world, and the energy contained within it caused the expressions of everyone to change. Moreover, its target was Yi Xian. Would Yi Xian be able to resist it? Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiaoqi's group of 3 suddenly stood in front of Yi Xian. Xiaoqi said, "Attack together." As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed a finger at Ji Jing from afar. In an instant, the sword light on the tip of her finger shot forward. However, it hadn't even gotten close to the black sword when it shattered into pieces and transformed into nothingness. Xiaoqi's eyes narrowed slightly when she witnessed this scene. She was just about to attack again when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Allow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared before them. Yi Xian had a solemn expression on his face as he gazed at the sword that tore through the sky towards him. He didn't choose to take it head-on, because it told him that he couldn't take it head-on, and he would definitely die if he did. The energy contained within the sword exceeded the limits of what his body could endure. What should I do? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. When the black sword arrived over 100 m away from him, he suddenly opened his eyes and roared furiously, "Save me!" Everyone was speechless. P.S. There was a blackout in the neighborhood today. I've been waiting until now. Because the script is on the computer, I can't update it anywhere else. I'm over an hour late. Sorry. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.